Welcome to Draft Utopia on TalkShoe and Restream. I even tried to set it up on Spotify this morning, but to no avail. I think you have to upload files there now instead of having the built-in features that Anchor used to have. But that's no worries. Today we're here. We're going to talk about Big 12. We're going to talk about the AFC South and the NFC South a little bit later. I've got my co-host Joseph Potter, and I've got my other co-host from Under the Bleachers, William Yanish. And today we're going to talk about the Big 12. We're going to dive straight into it. And the first team I'm going to preview is the Houston Cougars. When I took notes on the Houston Cougars, I pointed 5 pro prospects: quarterback Donovan Smith, wide receiver Joseph Manjack, left guard Peyton Dunn, right guard Tank Jenkins, and middle linebacker Jamal Morris. This team did lose Patrick Paul, a second-round pick by the Miami Dolphins. They also lost Nelson Caesar, an edge rusher. But the Houston Cougars are expected to be a bottom-of-the-barrel team in the Big 12 once again. What can they do to change their outlook? I'm going to start with you, William.
Well, that's one thing, everything starts with the quarterback. When I evaluated Donovan Smith, I saw obviously, the big body, 6'5", 241 pounds. He is way experienced. He's been to Arkansas, been a lot of places, and Texas Tech. This is a big guy. He's not real mobile. What he offers Houston is the experience from the SSC when he was with Arkansas. The one thing when he was at Texas Tech is he could never really beat Tyler Shugout. This kid needs a ton of work, and I don't see him being more than ever a backup in this league. I mean, he, like I said, kind of mobile. He's got an all right arm. He throws with some touch. He can definitely handle the college game. But like I said, the concerns are going to the NFL. Other than that, Houston, I don't have a whole lot of information on. Like I said, I'm
And the
just
thing is,
guy.
Chris Smith, the father of Donovan Smith, is the Colts running back coach, and the Colts are one of the teams we are going to preview later today. I could see the Colts drafting him in round 3 or 4 as a backup to Richardson, but I really can't see him going. I mean, Ian Cummings of Pro Football Network had him going number 2 overall in his 7-round mock draft. I don't think he goes that high personally, but he has built a lot of traction within the draft community. So it is a name to keep an eye on regardless. But I think he's more of a 3rd to 4th round pick, high-end backup type quarterback.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I had him. And I had that note on there about a good place for him to end up with would be with his father with the Colts, and backing up Anthony Richardson. So.
Whatever you want to call it, it's not incredible. So, what do? I'm looking, want to be competitive. Use Tank in the running game, let him plow through people, and get quick passes, because you got some good receivers. You've got some guys that are quick, you can get up the middle, you can draw those safeties in a little bit and hit high. But you have to be quick, and that is going to be for Houston this year. They have to be quick. And they've got to use the fact that they've got a very good prospect that's coming up for the draft at tackle, and you've got to use that. And if you can use those things to your advantage, I think Houston can, not saying they will, but they can take expectations and they can keep them.
Yeah, you lose Patrick Paul at left tackle, but you have Peyton Dunn and you have Tank Jenkins, 2 offensive linemen at left guard and right guard. They're going to be big for opening up this running game, as you mentioned, Joey. They're going to be big when it comes to taking pressure off of Smith at quarterback and opening up the running game. because they're one of the better guard tandems in the Big 12. So that is something working for the Houston Cougars. All right. The next team I'm going to mention is the Arizona State Sun Devils. They have 3 impact players. Cam Skatebo at running back, Leaf Fautanu at center, and Shamari Simmons at free safety. And I'm looking up Leaf Fautanu. He might be related to Troy Fautanu, so I am looking that up right now, double checking before I jump to conclusions on that. I want to see if he's related to Washington center Troy Washington's center / left tackle Troy Fautanu. I don't think they are related, but I'm double checking just to.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, so his uncle was Joe. His father was Leaf. He played. His uncle was Ed Ripley. His other uncle, Joe Onosai, was a center for the Cowboys. Father, Leaf, played in the Army. There's nothing about Troy Fautanu here, so I don't think he's related to Troy Fautanu, but Leaf Fautanu, center for Arizona State. Arizona State, I don't expect much from Arizona State. I think they might actually do worse than Houston, even though Houston is the projected worst team in the Big 12 this year. But, Arizona State really didn't do much in the Pac-12 after Jaden Daniels entered the transfer portal and went to LSU.
No, they were still ranked like something like 141st last year when they faced USC. So, yeah, I don't know a lot about this team, and like I said, it's kind of an afterthought.
Arizona State has a pretty good center, but a big good prospect. I've seen him. He's good. He's not overbearing. He's not overhyped. I mean, he gets by on talent alone, which is fine. That's what we want. But they have a safety that I thought last year could have gone in the second round of the NFL draft. So you're looking at a team that may have a first-round draft pick this year if he replicates the season he had last year, or a team pick.
And Shamari Simmons led the Sun Devils with 796 snaps last year.
Yeah, so, and a center that could be a mid-round pick if he has a really good year. So, Arizona has more prospects. They have better prospects than Houston. But they don't have the overall team that Houston does. I think that's the big thing. Because you have the stars. Having stars is something I always harp on, because they come out at night. But the big thing is, you don't have the people around them, you're just going to get the stars. I mean, let's face it, we all want Joe Thomas going to the Hall of Fame, and look at those Cleveland teams. You have the stars, but you don't have the people around them, it doesn't matter. And I think that's what's going on with Arizona State.
Agreed.
A couple of stars, nothing else.
Yep. Next up is BYU. They've got a couple of receivers: Chase Roberts, Darius Lassiter. Waylon Lapoho is a left guard / right guard. Connor Pay at center. Braden Kime at right tackle. And Tyler Batty at right end. They do return quite a bit of offensive linemen. Despite losing Kingsley Suamadia, they have some good receivers. I don't know if the quarterback play or running back play is going to be enough. This is a team that lost Slovis. I don't know if the quarterback play is going to cut it at BYU, but they have some weapons. They have some offensive linemen, and they have a good edge rusher. So
yeah, that's one thing about BYU is, they always get some wins someplace and decently, have a good offense. And, like you mentioned, so many returning starters helps as well. It's definitely an experienced team.
Every now and then they'll get a really good quarterback. But the really good quarterback in college is
What about Steve Young, a guy for San Francisco? He won a Super Bowl MVP with the 49ers. He's drafted by the Bucket.
Yep. Yep, did go to BYU, did he?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, that slipped my mind. But yeah. So, two quarterbacks out of 100 years or 200 years or however long they've been.
And I think they won a national title with Jim McMahon, too, when Andy Reid was there as an offensive line coach.
That does sound right.
Steve McNair was an interesting individual, interesting quarterback. I think he won a Super Bowl. He won a Super Bowl with the Bears, but at the same time, he was not the capital. He was kind of like the Trent Dilfer, only with a lot more personality, to say the least.
He was 80s Trent Dilfer. Think Trent Dilfer with Johnny Lawrence's personality from the Karate Kid movies. That's basically
And hyped up on drugs.
Yep.
So you gotta get that too.
Yep.
I mean, Jim McMahon was a character. He was a guy I'd love to hang out with, but his shelf life was only 4 or 5 years. And he did some things that you would never want anybody to do. Including that music video for the Bears when they went to the Super Bowl. That's also one of those things you never want your quarterback to do. And we hope to never see a quarterback do that again. BYU has always been outside of 4 or 5 teams. They've always been underwhelming. Always been built up, always been hyped up, always been underwhelming. End result almost never comes up to the hype. So I'm not going to overhype them. I'm going to say they're definitely good athletes. They have a decent quarterback. They're going to get pass rush or two. They're going to have a good pass rush this year. But I'm not going to overhype them like I'm sure ESPN's going to do. I'm sure a lot of other people are going to do. I'm not going to do that because over the years, I've learned don't overhype these guys because when you overhype them, they're going to pay. But when you look at them under the radar, that's when they're going to. So, hopefully, I'm just going to let it slide. Hopefully, they have a better season than what people expect. Because I think they have the potential to do so. But it's like any NFL prospect. Potential is great. It's what you do with the matter. And right now, BYU is nothing but potential.
Yep.
So, I think they can finish top 3 in the conference. I think they can finish bottom 3 in the conference. They're nothing but potential. And we'll see where that lands.
Yeah, the next team we're going to preview is the Colorado Buffaloes. And this is a team William and I have had numerous conversations with Brandis Bell about and under the bleachers. But next up, they've got Shedeur Sanders coming back, Dallas Jaden at running back, Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn Jr., LeConte Wester's a player we never talked about, William. They've got Will Shepard from Vanderbilt in the portal.
Yeah.
They got a lot of talent coming in. And LeConte Wester, he was the number 1 receiver at I'm trying to think where LeJohntay Wester, he was the number 1 receiver at Florida Atlantic. And Will Shepard was the number 1 receiver at Vanderbilt last year. So 2 number 1 receivers coming in to pair with Jimmy Horn Jr. and Travis Hunter despite losing Xavier Weaver. They've got Savell Smalls and Sam Hart at tight end. They brought in Phil Lodeholt, the former Oklahoma left tackle, to be the new offensive line coach, and 5 new starters on the offensive line, including a 5-star recruit at left tackle. And I think those adjustments on the offensive line are going to make this offense more potent. only a few impact players on defense. Hunter, Preston Hodge, Shiloh Sanders in the secondary, and they also have Levonta Bentley at middle linebacker and Shane Cokes at defensive tackle. And we've talked about Colorado in depth with Brandis. I've got them at 8-4. They could be 7-5 or 6-6 if they lose some trap games. But for the most part, I think they're going to be more disciplined than last year. And I think their first loss will come to Kansas State on October 12th, and they'll enter that game 5-0. You would think.
That's definitely interesting. The Colorado State game last year, that was definitely a trap game. Also, the one thing that I haven't really touched on is Pat Shurmur, coming over from the NFL. This offense last year was a custom built, Mike Leach air raid offense. And I'm not sure what Shermer's going to do. He hasn't been in college since he was offensive line coach.
What's interesting is a AFC North scout told Jordan Reed in confidence that Shedeur Sanders reminds them of Joe Burrow. It's got to be a Southwest scout because Colorado's in the Southwest region, so it's got to be a Southwest scout. The Browns Southwest scout scouted Jalen Hurts when he was on the Eagles, and then the Eagles got rid of him at 2 years before 2022, 2023, because the first 2 years Jalen Hurts hadn't really established himself as that star quarterback in the NFL. And then the moment they get rid of him and the Browns pick up that scout, Jalen Hurts breaks out. So Howie Roseman's decision to not renew that scout's contract was in fact a premature decision. And I believe that is the scout, even though Jordan Reed's not going to reveal what scout on the AFC North compared Shedeur Sanders to Burrow. I believe it was that scout, the same former Eagles scout that scouted Jalen Hurts. Steelers do not have a Southwest scout, and I really can't see the Bengals or Ravens leaking this information to the general public. So I would think it's either the Browns or Steelers that is comparing Shedeur to Burrow. I would think it's one of those two teams because Steelers have two quarterbacks on one-year contracts, and the Browns have the Southwest scout who scouted Jalen Hurts when he was at Oklahoma. I would think by process of elimination, it's one of those two teams with this scouting report and player comp for Shedeur. Do I agree with the comp that Shedeur has similarities to Burrow? No, not at all. But I do think that is an interesting conclusion to jump to.
I'm from Ransom, Ohio. I knew Joe Burrow's dad. I left a year after they moved back. Obviously, I was raised with it. If you don't stand or not, you can tell the difference with those two guys just because of the way they carry themselves. This is by the way they do. Joe Burrow does things like
Agreed.
because their upbringing, their thought process, their attitude, completely different. I expect they think of Colorado this year because I love the talent they have. They're going to be exciting to watch. But in comparison, Joe Burrow, there's one left and one of those Get Palmer, Ohio, outside of Cleveland. It's absolutely ridiculous. And some person who has never been back, who has never lived the lifestyle.
And Shedeur played at a 6A high school in Texas before going to Jackson State. He played at a 6A high school that Dion coached in Texas before going to Jackson State. Burrow, I don't know if Burrow played for a prestigious place like that allowed him to get on the radar pretty quickly.
Where in Athens is a prestigious place like that? Nowhere. They got more prestigious, but once you get out of there and look around, it's like, well, this is a dunky little nothing. You know, it's like they had, they had traveling cheap. That's what they call traveling cheap.
Yep.
And then by the time I was a senior in high school, they finally said, like, you know what, we're going to call it AAC. It's my time. My time. In that area. Okay? Joe Burrow is a world. It is an amazing world. Okay, it's not so much an amazing world, it's based on the strong enough. Joe Burrow is strong enough.
We don't know if Shedeur is strong enough yet, but if last year is any indication, that may not be the case. Any closing thoughts about Colorado before we get to Cincinnati? I know.
Joe Burrow had to be wrong from the very beginning. Like, that's the opinion of he had to know. Shedeur is going to develop that strength. I have confidence Shedeur will develop that strength. And I think Shedeur develops that strength second. I think he's got a little bit higher than my last one. Because he was touted as a first round pick and this and that and everything else. And then when he gets to division, high ranked division one, he found out they make that easy. Now I think he's going to be more prepared. I think he was aged a little bit too much. Now he's going to be prepared. So I have high hopes for Colorado. I like the defense. I like the offensive line. I like that level. I like the running game. It all comes down to Joe. They will prepare Joe Burrow. I think that's what he's going to take the mind. I need to do a crystal will. I need that confidence. I need to see that person says, I am the best. I dare you.
Yeah, and they're going to play a lot of tough opponents. They're going to play Kansas State at home. They're going to play Arizona on the road. They're going to play Kansas State. They're going to play the Jayhawks in Arrowhead, and they're going to play Oklahoma State and Utah at home to end the year. They've got some tough games in that schedule.
I see about 6 losses, man. And
Here's the thing. That's what I was saying before you interrupted. The same thing I say every single day when I go to work. I don't care who you are, if you're younger, you're older, whatever. That I dare you. Joe Burrow says that every day. That I dare you. Tom Brady says it every day. He's better than me. I dare you. I'm going to outwork you. And that's what me, Burrow, and Brady, that's when you join
I've got Colorado doing a little bit better than William at 8-4, but I think 6-6 to 8-4 is the floor is 6-6, the ceiling's 8-4. I really don't see Colorado winning 9 or 10 games.
No, it's going to be tough for them to do anything of the sort.
Yeah,
especially last year.
Tom Brady ended up with. They'll win 10 games. If he doesn't get that development, then you're right. You only won 8 games. But it's all good.
yeah.
And that mentality of can't stop. I don't care who you are, I don't care what you do. Stop. That's something that fucking has I'm praying to this for OEA. That's Tom Brady. And bringing him in an early work it or get it. We'll get it. We're gonna find out this year.
Yep. And I'll talk a little bit more about Shedeur in 3 weeks when I reveal my mock draft on August 31st, the first week of college football season. But let's talk about Cincinnati now. Cincinnati's got 5. They're one team with all 5 starters in the offensive line returning. John Williams at left tackle, Dartian Tinsley at left guard, Garrett Gerhardt at center, Luke Kandra at right guard, DeAndre Burford at right tackle, and Dante Corleone, a player Joey and I talked about last year at defensive tackle. I think Kandra and Corleone both have the potential to be day 2 picks. I think these other guys could get picked on day 3. But Cincinnati, they're going to go as far as their offensive line and Dante Corleone take them. That's really the bottom line when it comes to the Cincinnati Bearcats, unless I missed something as far as prospects to watch, Joey and William. If I did, feel free to chime in.
Not so much. This hasn't been a competitive team the last couple of years, and it's another one of those kind of afterthoughts. Way experience,
Yeah, they lost Luke Fickell to Wisconsin. They lost Desmond Ritter. They've fallen from grace since their undefeated season a few years ago.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, I can't say much more than that. The Corleone thing. I've definitely heard that and read a few things, and so I definitely agree with that. And I agree with the experienced offensive line. Returning every starter, and that can help them get some wins.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, they do have they get Pittsburgh at home. They get Miami, Ohio, and Townsend. They should win 2 of their first 3 games. They might beat Pittsburgh. So if they're 3-0 heading into conference play, they get Houston. They travel to Texas Tech. They travel to Central Florida. They host Arizona State. They travel to Colorado. They host West Virginia, and they travel to Iowa State. And then they get Kansas State. I think they've got to get that 6th win against West Virginia by November 9th. Otherwise, they're not going to be in a bowl game. And most are projecting to miss a bowl game. But I think if they start 3-0 in non-conference play, they beat Houston. I think they can beat Houston and Arizona State at home, William. But the big thing is the game against West Virginia. They're going to have to win that in order to make a bowl game. They're going to have to get that 6th win to be bowl eligible. I can't see them beating Colorado or Kansas State or TCU. I just don't think they have enough pieces. So I'm not saying they can't make a bowl game, but I think they're going to have to get that 6th win against West Virginia in order to be bowl eligible.
Yeah, and that's a tall order. West Virginia always has a team, that gets some wins. So yeah. I mean, it's going to be a tough one, and especially with Iowa State after that, they're always a competitive team. And then Kansas State. I mean, so.
Anything you want to add to that, Joey, before we get to the next team, Baylor? Because I know you're a big fan of Corleone. I mean, if you want to add something to that.
I do think you're understating Corleone. I do think he will be a first-round prospect able to do about it.
It's just such a deep defensive tackle draft. It's not that I don't think he can get there. There's just so many other guys in this class that are ahead of him right now. Deion Walker's the number one. You've got the
When we were talking about the NFL draft this year, we were talking about Michael Hall, where he would have slotted into next year's draft.
he wasn't even the second best defensive tackle on Ohio State. I mean, Michael Hall, Tyleek Williams, and they had another guy starting over Michael Hall Jr.
Yeah, and we agree. It wasn't anything against Hall. Because this tackle class is loaded.
It is.
And I mean, it's nothing against any of these prospects, but it's loaded.
It is.
And I think that's the reason a couple of the prospects last year came out when they could come back is because Baylor's tackle was coming in.
Yeah, because you got Deion Walker, you've got Kenneth Grant, Mason Smith of Michigan, you got Walter Nolan, former Texas A&M defensive tackle that transferred to Ole Miss this year. You've got Howard Cross, Tyleek Williams. Notre Dame's got another defensive tackle projected to go in the top 100. And then you got Corleone. It's an absolutely stacked defensive tackle group. So regardless of where Corleone ends up, I think a team's going to be getting an NFL starter with him. But let's go to Baylor. Baylor really only has one draft-eligible prospect, and it is their running back, Dominic Richardson. And this guy, Dominic Richardson's a junior this year, but he was the catalyst for the Baylor Bears this past season, as Dominic Richardson had 546 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown. Those aren't great numbers, but that's Baylor's best prospect. Baylor might be the most underwhelming team we've previewed so far, but the crazy part is they're projected to finish ahead of Houston, Arizona State, BYU, Colorado, and Cincinnati, according to Phil Steele. So we'll see what happens with Baylor. But Richardson's probably the only serious NFL prospect they've got at the moment.
Well, Baylor has lost a lot of prospects over the last few years. So everything going into Baylor's projection based on projection what the backup will be. So that for me is Baylor has a lot of potential. Baylor is not going to do very well this year. I'm looking at Baylor for 2026 because 2025, 2026, because they're going to have a lot of guys that were projecting to be pretty good. So we really don't know because most of them are backups.
Yep.
And they're just coming in. And they're just coming into their own here in the next year or two.
Yep. Next team we're going to preview is Texas Tech. They've got Baron Morton taking over for Tyler Show at quarterback. They've got a running back, William Yanish is a big fan of, and Taj Brooks. Jalen Conyers is their tight end. And they've got a Maureen Banks at defensive tackle and Ben Roberts at middle linebacker. Those are their 5 pro prospects in this year's upcoming season for Texas Tech. What Texas Tech is interesting because some have this team winning. I think 8 wins is a little too much, but they're in an interesting spot. They win their non-conference games. They get Arizona State and Cincinnati at home. You could be undefeated heading into Arizona on October 5th. You get Baylor at home, so I do think they're going to make a bowl game based off their schedule. I think they're going to win at least 6 games. Can they get more than that? I think if they could steal a game against Colorado or West Virginia at home, they could potentially end up at 7 or 8 wins. But I think they're an interesting team, and I think they'll be in a bowl game this year.
Yeah, definitely. This is a quarterback that I do like coming on in the next couple of years, Baron Morton. I had a 4th round grade on him just based on what there was to see. the thing is his development and getting away from the injuries. He had a AC joint sprain, and it literally was the same kind of throwing motion, the twisting torque that I saw from Michael Penix that had the same injury. It was almost like he was trying to avoid the pain, and something there was clicking. But that's I I can't say anything about that besides what has been written. I do see him developing into a pretty good college quarterback, and possibly going into the NFL. Like I said, if he can stay away from those, Taj Brooks takes a ton of strain off him. That is a back that absolutely popped on film. It was like when I say popped on film, when I'm watching film for a prospect like a quarterback, um, and keep seeing a guy over and over again just popping out is something that is actually pretty rare. And Taj Brooks has been one of those backs, and I expect him to do well. The thing with this team is the turnover on the offensive line, and just in general, that they've only got four returning starters on the offense, and a couple on the defense. But
This says 5 returning starters on defense and 9 on offense. But Taj Brooks had 1,500 yards. If he can do that again, this should be a 7 to 8 win team.
yeah, for sure. And I can see that the schedule will allow him, if like I said, if he stays healthy and develops into a good quarterback, which I'm sure he will. You're absolutely right on the schedule. It's a bunch of mid teams that can squeak one out against them, but I can definitely see them getting 8 wins and getting a bowl game. Putting Morton in position to have a little bit of national attention brought to him. Other than that,
Yep. You want to add anything to Texas Tech, Joey? The next team we're going to preview after Texas Tech is Central Florida, and they got KJ Jefferson from Arkansas in the transfer portal. So,
for me, Texas Tech has always been one of the most underwhelming teams in college football. Remember, for a 3-year stretch, they had 3 NFL quarterbacks, 2 in Patrick Mahomes and Baker Mayfield, that are still starting on their roster, and they couldn't do anything with it. Mayfield left. Mahomes finished his last year like 8 wins. They couldn't unlock Mahomes. The only talent that they were ever able to unlock was Myles Garrett. Okay.
Myles Garrett went to Texas A&M.
My bad. But that means they've never been able to unlock any talent.
I mean, Texas Tech's peak was probably 2008, 2009 when they had Mike Leach and Michael Crabtree. That was probably their peak, and they had Graham Harrell, I think, at quarterback.
Yeah.
So that was probably their peak.
They've never been able to unlock any talent. Even Crabtree is close to peaking. He had to go to the NFL to peak. They can't unlock talent. They have the most talent in college football from a raw athletic ability standpoint. Year in and year out, and year in and year out, they fail to unlock that talent. I just gave you a couple of high-profile examples of it. They can't unlock talent. Can't do it. And that's what fuels them. That's not they don't have the talent. They have the talent right now in the conference. Does anybody have confidence they'll do it? Yeah. Zero. You know why? Because they can't unlock talent. A lot of these players will go to the NFL, and they'll be a million times better than they ever were at Texas Tech. can find some sleepers in the draft.
Yeah.
Because I have no expect I will be able to do anything with them.
So next up is Central Florida. They got KJ Jefferson replacing John Rhys Plumlee. They have RJ Harvey, who had 1,478 rushing yards, back at running back. Kobe Hudson and Xavier Townsend were the number 2 and number 3 receivers next to Javon Baker last year. Now they're going to be number 1 and number 2 weapons. And Malachi Lawrence Jr. at edge rusher at right end is their pass rusher. So that's Central Florida, their prospects. I do think, I mean, they're going to beat New Hampshire and Sam Houston State. They'll probably lose to TCU and Colorado and Florida. They play Cincinnati at home. That could go either way, if I'm being honest, but I'll give them that win. They play Iowa State. They'll probably lose that. So I see 4 wins on the schedule. If they can beat Arizona State, that's 5 wins. But they got to beat either Arizona or Utah at home or West Virginia on the road. They probably have the best chance of getting that 6th win by going into Morgantown, I would think. But this is another Big 12 coin flip team when it comes to bowl eligibility. I mean, they're right on the fence of being bowl eligible.
Yeah, this team, there's one I misspoke earlier. I mentioned KJ Jefferson, talking about Arkansas. But no, it's the same kind of thing. KJ Jefferson is not a lot different than Donovan Smith, and like I said, he's way experienced. It's kind of interesting to see him coming into Gus Malzahn's offense here with the UFC after running with Plumlee for 2 years. RJ Harvey is a pretty good back. I mean, especially for UCF. UCF, used to kind of be the team that was where you went when you couldn't, get on the field anywhere else. But that's not an insult. Like I said, I really liked Plumlee last year, and I like what he's bringing to the NFL. What's going to happen with this team is it just going to get swamped in the Big 12 again. I mean, it's one of those things with them, and their 2nd year in the Big 12, and that has an effect. Gus Malzahn, he didn't have a lot of success at Auburn or too many other places he's been, and of course, that there's going to be a couple players out of here that are going to get some looks in the NFL, and KJ Jefferson, that's another what I feel career backup. He can come in and win some games, and he tries to play the Cam Newton role, but that. He's not that. He's not that athletic. He's not that fast, and he doesn't have that strong of an arm, actually. But no, I don't want to sit there and drag on with that. But they the depth on the offensive line is looking good, and that's about it, man.
All right, next team we're going to preview is the Kansas Jayhawks, and boy, do they have a lot of talent coming back. Jalen Daniels at quarterback, Devin Neal at running back. They've got 3 receivers, Lawrence Arnold, Luke Grimm, Quentin Skinner. Michael Ford's their right guard. They also have Bryce Cabaldu at right tackle. And they have Jareem Robinson at right end /34 right outside linebacker. They have DJ Winters, who can play everywhere in a 34 defense as well as defensive tackle. They have JB Brown at weak side linebacker. Kobe Bryant and Mello Dotson are the corners, Marvin Grant, strong safety, and OJ Burrows at free safety, despite losing one of their other safeties in the NFL draft this past year. But the Kansas Jayhawks look loaded. This is going to sound crazy, but I think if they beat Kansas State, they are going to go 12-0 because they do not play Utah, William. I'm looking at the schedule for Kansas. Lindenwood at Illinois, versus UNLV, at West Virginia, versus TCU, at Arizona State, versus Houston, at Kansas State, versus Iowa State, at BYU, versus Colorado, and at Baylor. That is a schedule that screams 12-0 if they can beat Kansas State on the road.
The thing is, man, the Big 12 media poll on who was going to win, Utah was number 1 with 20 votes. Kansas State had 19. Oklahoma State had 14. Kansas had 5, and Arizona had 3. But 5 for this team. I
I
mean,
think they
that
get
is
the Big 12 championship, but they get their ass kicked. That's kind of what I'm projecting, because they
yeah,
end the year 11-1 or 12-0, and then they end up losing the Big 12 championship by 14 or 21 points.
yeah, to like Utah or Kansas
Buddy.
State. You know, I mean,
And it's the type of loss that gets them from number 10 and drags them down to like 13 or 14. They end up missing the playoff on that championship game alone. That's kind of what I'm expecting from the Jayhawks this year.
yeah, and they're loaded at talent. Jalen Daniels
They are. And they have an
is-
easy strength of schedule. And the Kansas State game, while it is a game most have them losing, with Will Howard at Ohio State, it is a game they have a landslide shot of winning as well. But I think Oklahoma State and Utah are the 2 best teams in the conference. And Kansas, they have the benefit of not playing either one in regular season play this year, as well as a loaded roster. So they have a chance to do something.
Luke Grimm is a player that I'm watching. He is another one of those that popped on the film, and I can only say that with a handful of players popping in.
If you look at offense in those corners, I could see 10 of the top 100 prospects in this NFL draft coming out. Point blank, from running back, quarterback, receivers, both corners. I love their guard combination. He said, like you said, 12-0. The biggest 12-0 I don't think was in the competition. The momentum, the talent, it would all be there. And I could see them finishing as low as 12, like you said. But also, finishing as high as number 5.
If they win the conference championship at 12-0, they would be a top 4 team. And if Georgia or Ohio State fails to go undefeated, they might actually be the number 1 team in the playoff. That's the scary thing.
Yeah, and they've got the talent because, like I said, stars come out at night, been saying it for years. You put all those stars, all those NFL prospects.
They remind me of TCU 2 years ago, when a lot of people slept on TCU and they made it to the championship game. They beat Michigan 45-42, and they made it to the championship only to get embarrassed by Georgia. They do remind me of TCU 2 years ago.
This is a much better team than TCU, but yeah, definitely.
I mean, Georgia is the predominant college football organization at this point. So, I mean, a lot of people get embarrassed by Georgia. Ohio State at one point got embarrassed by Georgia. Everybody gets embarrassed by Georgia. So I don't think that's an insult. That's just the dominance of Georgia. But with the extended playoffs, all that changes. Because we don't even know. Because Georgia could dominate one game, get knocked off in the second.
Georgia has to play Alabama and Texas on the road. Those should be wins, but they could both be losses.
So we'll see. But I say don't sleep on these guys. Because when you're looking for the big stars to make big plays, they got a lot of big stars. And if they make big plays, it's going to be tough to beat.
Jalen Daniels has always had potential to be great, but he's been injured the last 2 years. If he stays healthy this year, I think the sky's the limit for Kansas.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the one thing with Daniels is the injuries. You know, they don't have Jason Bean anymore to back him up. Actually, now they have Cole Ballard, Chris Ballard's son, the GM. But you know, that's one thing you really have to watch because you know, with Bean last year, you know, they had a little bit of success, but it just wasn't the same thing that they can have with Daniels. So if he stays on the field, man, and I mean these tight ends are absolutely tits on this team. I mean, Jared Casey and a couple of the other ones, you know, they all play a role, and Jalen Daniels helps expand that. So, you know, that's the lifeblood of this team.
Yeah. Next team is TCU. I don't think this team is as exciting or as interesting as Kansas, but they do have 4 prospects. They've got Josh Hoover at quarterback, Sabian Williams at running back, Avery Helmet corner, and Bud Clark at free safety. It feels like TCU's been more of a secondary wide receiver factory the last few years when it comes to the NFL draft. That really seems to be their bread and butter as of late. I know they had some really good prospects in 22 and 23, and I get that, but it really feels like as of late that secondary and receivers where TCU churns out their talent in recent years.
Yeah, for sure. And, another air raid team, watching them against Colorado last year was definitely interesting, with them trying to pump up the pace like they were. But yeah, you're definitely right with the receivers and cornerbacks, but those are, 2 of the biggest positions in football right now. And like I said, it's another team. They kind of, had a good year, with Max Duggan, no matter what he is, or projects in the NFL, I mean, but now they have to figure out something else, and that's up to Sonny Dykes.
Yep. What do you want to add to TCU, Joey, before I get to West Virginia? All right, I guess I'll just get to West Virginia.
Well, TCU is a major threat in a lot of ways. I've never been a huge fan, but they are really, really, really good at hitting expectations. I said earlier, they usually fall flat, but that's my expectation. My expectations are always really low. So they always exceed mine. And AFC always pops them up. Expectations are BYU are irritating. So I'm looking at middle of the. I don't think they're going to finish. Honestly, I don't think they finish head of Colorado. I don't see any overly intriguing prospects. I don't see any stars. I see them in the middle of the season. They always exceed my expectations, even though they could never meet mainstream expectations. So
TCU is projected to finish 7th among 16 Big 12 teams. They're projected to finish 7th. I think they're more in the 10th, 11th range personally, but they are.
That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. TCU they're just never. They always fall short, but ESPN will always build them up. That's the way I see it. And I'm not a fan. I'm just not a fan of what they got going. I don't think they're that great. But for some reason, they're protected and got past their conference. Why? Maybe we'll never know.
Next
Vegas has something to do with it.
Next up is West Virginia. They've got 3 prospects. They're projected to finish 6th. Kansas is projected to finish 8th, but I think they're going to be a top 5 team in the conference. But West Virginia, Wyatt Millam at left tackle, Thomas Rimmick at left guard, and Sean Martin at 34 right end. They had Dante Stills a few years ago. Those are the 3 impact players in West Virginia. And while I like these offensive linemen, neither guy has the floor or ceiling that Zach Frazier did. Frazier had the floor to be a day 1 starter. I don't get that vibe with the other 2 linemen. They're a little bit raw. But I do. And West Virginia's also got a brutal schedule. They host Penn State at noon. They face Albany. They're going to win against Albany, but they got to go to Pittsburgh for the backyard brawl, and then conference play starts. They host Kansas. They travel to Oklahoma State. They host Iowa State. They host Kansas State. They travel to Arizona, at Cincinnati versus Baylor, versus Central Florida, at Texas Tech. Most have them winning 6 games, making a bowl game. Honestly, I think West Virginia goes 4-8 or 3-9. That's my bold take. That schedule they have is brutal.
Yeah, I was just looking at that, man, and definitely they might win 6 games. There's definitely 5 losses there, and they might win 6. But like you said, man, it can easily go down to 4-8 or 3-9, easily. So they have Garrett Green, a smaller quarterback. He's experienced. I hadn't had enough time to look at him to really pass a judgment on him. But like you said, that brutal schedule, and I'm not sure just where they're going to end up. And Garrett Green, he might excel, but then again, 5'11", 201-pound quarterback. He's almost Kyler Murray size and probably lose an inch like most quarterbacks do when they hit the combine. But yeah, dude, that's about what I got on them.
Yep. Anything you want to add to that, Joey? I mean, this is a team that went 9-4 last year, but I do expect a free fall with a much tougher schedule and more competition incoming.
I think that this team, they are going to hopefully one, maybe 2 more games, but that's what I saw from last year. I don't remember the name, but their receivers, I remember saying, one of these guys is going to break out huge. One of these guys is going to have a season that's going to propel him into the first or second round of the NFL draft. Their receivers intriguing. The question is, which one is going to break out? And that's what gets me with West Virginia. They had like 3 receivers last year I really liked.
I'm guessing one of them is 29, Preston Fox. Is Preston Fox one of the receivers you're thinking of? Number 29. They also have 5, Jaden Bray, and they have 87, a tight end, Cole Taylor.
5 is Bray.
5 is Jaden Bray.
I remember. Yeah, he's one of them I remember clearly watching, and I'm like, this dude's got potential. Make the most. So that's one to watch. West Virginia has weapons. Now, the big question to me is, do they have a quarterback of doing what needs to be done to allow these receivers to show what they can on a consistent basis? And I think that will determine whether West Virginia meets expectations, gets 9 or 10 wins, or gets where you have them, but round 7. That quarterback right here, he's going to get this one home. Because I think West Virginia has first, second round weapons potential. It depends on the quarterback.
Yep. And next team we're going to preview is the Arizona Wildcats. This is a fun team. They've got Ja'Cory Cross getting Merritt at running back, McMillan at receiver. They've got some offensive linemen, Wendell Moe at left guard, Josh Baker at center, Jonah Salavina at right tackle, and then Javon Manu at middle linebacker, Tacario Davis, a second-round corner. I actually mocked Tacario in my late first round, and Gunnar Maldonado at free safety. They also got Fifada, who did really well as a true freshman last year back. He could be a 2026 QB to watch. But what Arizona, I think they can win 10 games. I mean, their 2 toughest games are at Kansas State and at Utah, and everything else on the schedule is winnable. They don't play Kansas or Oklahoma State. They don't play Utah. So there are a lot of advantageous games for Arizona. I don't think they end up in the Big 10 championship, Big 12 championship, but I do think top 5 in the conference is realistic, and I think they can finish 10-2. Now,
I think so easily.
Arizona is, I have to look at it and say, I think they may have one of the best running backs in the nation. And I think with that offensive line, as you mentioned, especially that interior, he has a chance to prove that. Now, that being said, I'm not as confident in their passing game. I think it's good, but if they're going to be top of the conference, it's got to be really good because this is a really good conference with a lot of potential. So, for me, I'm looking at it and saying, hey, if you play your cards right, you're going to have potentially one of the best, if not the best, rushing offenses in the nation. But, how are you going to supplement that?
Fafita had a promising freshman year in the Pac-12 last year, but he's going to have to build on that against tougher Big 12 defenses, and McMillan is the number 2 receiver in the draft right now behind Luther Burden. So
yeah, Fafita, I mean, after his first 2 starts, taking Michael Penix Jr. and Caleb Williams to the absolute max last year, and then still riding a 7-game winning streak since, and just the players he had around him. They had a coaching change, which is something that I'm interested in, because I saw outstanding coaching, but then they ended up at Washington. Fafita is definitely I feel is an underrated Heisman prospect, and outside of his size, 5'10", 194 pounds, he's a little dude, but I mean, he can absolutely sling it, and he has the weapons around him like none other. The schedule is something that also needs to be mentioned. I mean, they've got, open up against New Mexico, Northern Arizona, then at Kansas State, at Utah, Texas Tech, BYU, Colorado, West Virginia, UCF, Houston, TCU, Arizona State. The only real ones that I see there are, like Utah and Kansas State, maybe. I mean, this is a team that can rise up in the Big 12, and I can see them getting to that championship. That's not a hard schedule. That's not anything like that. The supporting cast, McMillan, the tight ends they have, that was one thing that popped. That they've got an experienced offensive line, and they really have something going. Like I said, Fafita is going to rise up this year, and I feel that they will, be at least competing for the championship at some point this year.
yeah, next team we're going to mention is Iowa State. I don't see a Big 12 title contender, but they've got they might have the best offensive tackle tandem in the conference. They've got Jalen Travis from Princeton at left tackle and Tyler Miller at right tackle. Bo Frailer can play linebacker or corner, and they've got Malik Vernon at strong safety and Jeremiah Cooper at free safety. And then you look at the schedule versus North Dakota, at Iowa, versus Arkansas State, at Houston, versus Baylor, at West Virginia, versus Central Florida, versus Texas Tech, at Kansas, versus Cincinnati, at Utah, versus Kansas State. I see at least 7 wins, 6 or 7 wins, and maybe 8 if they can upset Kansas State.
With the experience they have, I can see 8 wins, and Rocco Beckett coming in, returning at quarterback and everything else. This will be, they're not going to be a bump in the road for some of these Big 12 teams. Like I was saying at the beginning, this conference is kind of congested with mid-level teams, and it's going to be a dogfight at the end. But I mean, Iowa State can definitely come in there, win 11 games. I don't see a problem. I mean, 8 games, and I don't see a problem with that. So
I think Kansas, Utah, and Iowa are 3 losses minimum. I think the rest of the games are winnable. But I think they're going to either lose to West Virginia on the road or to Kansas State at home. They're going to lose one of those two. I don't know which one they're going to end up losing to, but that's kind of where I have 8 and 4.
These guys are the most solid all-around team in the conference. I truly believe that. But solid is solid. Solid's not going to win you a conference. Solid is going to get you a lot of good wins. They're going to get you a lot of moments. And they're going to showcase a lot of good players. If they don't have anybody that's going to say, wow, this guy is great and he's going to make these plays when needed. They're just an overall, all-around, really solid team. And so, well, I can't say they're going to finish top 3 or even have the potential to do so. I can say with confidence, they could barely be top 5. Because if you're as solid as they are, if a team doesn't bring their A game, they're probably going to lose.
Yeah, definitely. Next team we're going to mention is Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is stacked this year. They've got Alan Bowman at quarterback. They've got the top running back in the draft in terms of upside, and Ole Gordon. They've got Brennan Presley and Rashad Owens at receiver. All 5 starters back on the offensive line. Isaiah Glass at left tackle. Jason Brooks at left guard. Joe Mikowski at center. Jake Springfield at right guard. Dalton Cooper at right tackle. They've got 3 NFL linebackers. Kendall Daniels, right outside linebacker. Nick Barton, middle linebacker. Colin Oliver, left outside linebacker. They also have a cornerback tandem of Cam Smith and Corey Black. Trey Rucker is the free safety. And really, the 2 toughest games on their schedule are versus Utah, a game that they are currently favored to win at home, and Kansas State on the road. Like Kansas, we could legitimately get a 12-0 Oklahoma State versus 12-0 Kansas Big 12 championship. And if that happens, do both teams make the 12-team playoff, or would only one of those teams get in depending on how big the blowout is?
Yeah, that would depend. Looking at this, like you mentioned, Ollie Gordon is all over the Heisman watch, and just the experience that they bring back. And the schedule, like you mentioned, the Utah and Kansas State games are right in a row, towards the beginning of the season. But, I mean, they're definitely going to close out strong, I feel. And, that ending up closing out at Colorado, that game is probably going to be a little bit of a melee with this Oklahoma State team. I mean, they're going to take it to Colorado. And
I do think Colorado loses, but I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, like you said. I'm thinking like 49-35. Cowboys win by 2 touchdowns, but it's a highly competitive game, and Shedeur plays his ass off, but it just isn't enough.
Yeah. And that's definitely right there. Like you mentioned, the 12-0 possible conference championship. That's well within reach, man. All they got to do is go out there and grab it. Whether it's against Kansas or whether it's against Utah, I mean.
Yeah. I feel like Utah might be the best team on paper, but they are underdogs against Oklahoma State. And I don't know who'd win the tiebreaker against those two if it were played out like that. Kansas State, they do lose Will Howard. They get Easton Kitley at left tackle. He was a left tackle on Montana. Really good left tackle, but he heads to Kansas State. DJ Giddens is the running back. Keegan Johnson at receiver. Austin Moore, right outside linebacker, and Jordan Riley, a cornerback/safety. Those are their impact players. So, and the thing is, they do have Avery Johnson, a sophomore quarterback, coming in, taking over for Will Howard, with Will Howard going to Ohio State. So, how is Avery Johnson going to do as a true sophomore with these weapons? Kansas State is the number 2 team in the conference, but I think the 3 Goliaths this year are Utah, Oklahoma State, and Kansas. Just looking at the rosters, looking at the depth chart. I'm not saying Kansas State can't enter that conversation. They do get an easy non-conference schedule. They get Arizona at home. They get BYU. That game against Oklahoma State is going to probably determine a lot. They do have to go to Boulder, Colorado. They've got to play Kansas. I see at least 4 games they could lose, but I think, they're probably only going to lose 2 of those games. I see 4 games that are toss-up games for Kansas State, and they're going to lose a minimum of 2 of those games. And
I definitely agree with that. Thing is with Avery Johnson, if he doesn't fill out much, if he's still 6'2", 188 pounds, that can be a problem, especially here at Kansas State. They've had a few of those problems with, and then having Howard leave. Howard's definitely got a little bit more upside, but.
Obviously, doesn't have a lot of playing time. I've seen it third, but he's got a lot of potential. Their Achilles heel, in my opinion, is going to have nothing to do with their offense. I think their offense can click on all cylinders. My thought is, hey, with that defense. That defense ain't what it's been in previous years. Not going to be good. Can they outscore everybody they come across? And that's going to be a question. If you have an unproven quarterback, I believe in, I think it's going to be really good. But at the same time, I don't really know for certain. So when that happens, you're going to have to think, are these weapons going to do for naught? Because I think Oklahoma State has a chance for 45 points a game. What that means is they give up 47. Or if the quarterback doesn't live up to expectations and they only score 30, but they give up 40.
Yeah, so the Kansas State's one of these teams is tricky to evaluate. I do like them as a top 5 team in the conference, but I don't see a conference title team. And the final team we're going to preview is Utah, and then we'll reveal our Big 12 predictions. But Utah, they've got Cam Rising at quarterback. Money Parks and Dorian Singer from USC and Arizona are the top 2 receivers. Brant Kuth is back at tight end. Michael Mokofisi's the right guard. Junior Tafun is the defensive tackle. Van Fillinger is the left end. Kareem Reed, 34, middle linebacker. Zemiah Vaughn at corner. And then they've got some special teams aces and Cole Becker at kicker and Jack Boomeister at punter. And honestly, the Oklahoma State game is really the only game I could see Utah losing. And that feels like a pick'em game, even though Utah does enter that game as the underdog. So
yeah, I see them definitely winning the Big 12, the Oklahoma State game. And, I've always got my eye on Arizona because of like what I was saying, what I saw last year with them. But other than that, I don't see a problem as long as Cam Rising is healthy.
They don't play Arizona. They play Arizona State on October 11th. Oh, wait, they do play Arizona, but that's a home game.
Yeah. Cam Rising coming back and Brant Kuith, they were supposed to come back last year, like halfway through the season, and neither one of them made it. But, now they're finally back. Brant Kuith is a better route runner than Dalton Kincaid. Dalton Kincaid was a tight end that I absolutely fell in love with the first time watching this team and watching the heart and everything that Cam Rising plays with. I mean, he is definitely, I have a first round grade on him, and that all depends because now it's like 2 years later, and he is like 25 years old, but he still has one of the biggest hearts that I've seen in college football, and his play this team follows them, and just what they have here, and then ending up, in the Big 12, it doesn't seem, they come in as, like I said, the top team, according to that Big 12 media poll, with 20 votes, and Kansas State did 19, but other than that, I mean, the bread and butter of this team is the defense. It always has been. They ended up with a little bit of turnover, but not so much. I mean, they have a very experienced team coming back. And another thing, as long as they can stay healthy, I mean, this is a team to beat in the Big 12.
Yeah. I mean, as long as they can beat Oklahoma State in week 4, I think they're 12-0 heading into the conference title. And I think they're probably going to play. My prediction would be Utah over Kansas, but I think any of those three, Utah, Oklahoma State, Kansas, I think 2 of those teams are going to be 12-0 heading into that game, with the winner of Utah, Oklahoma State beating Kansas. But my question for you is, if the Utah, Oklahoma State game is decided by like a field goal, and then the other team routs Kansas, would the one-loss team that doesn't make the Big 12 championship jump the team that loses in the Big 12 championship if Kansas loses by that many points?
Yeah, that is a big question right there. And depending, what happens there, that's I don't even know what to say to that,
Yeah, that's.
Now I'm just going to spoil some things for you. I've got Kansas, Oklahoma State in the championship game. So, Utah is, every now and then, I'll look out and say, boy, they're a great team. Most of the time, they get overhyped. Another overhyped team. And then everybody's shocked when they fall short of 3 spots short of where they should have been. But every now and then they do have a great team. I don't think that's this year. I think they're going to fall short again. I think it's going to be Arizona, Oklahoma State. Championship game. So the question is, in my view, are both those going to make the 12-team playoff?
Yeah, because Kansas and Oklahoma State both have the schedules to go 12-0 if Oklahoma State can beat Utah at home. But that's one of those games where, I think whoever comes out of that game is going to be 12-0, and they're going to play Kansas for the title and win.
Yeah, I like Utah and Kansas at the top, with maybe Arizona looking in.
Kansas and Oklahoma State make it, and they both score 40-some points, and it's decided by a field goal or something like that, or a trick play.
I would think both teams would get in. And you could even argue that that's for the number 1 seed potentially if Georgia or Ohio State isn't undefeated heading to the conference title week.
Yeah, they've got to be looking at the strengths of these schedules here, and I feel both teams would probably get in. I mean, that should be, I mean, with the 12-team playoffs. So I don't know. This is the thing, where they don't have Bryson Barnes anymore as backup, and they have Zach Wilson's little brother Isaac coming in. So that's going to be interesting, if Cam can't get ready, or if Cam, gets hurt, or after it leaves next year, and it's definitely a tough team, and Kyle Whittingham is one of my top 3 coaches in college football, just the intensity that he plays with and such. So
yeah. We are going to preview the NFC South and AFC South pretty soon. If you want to stick around for that, you can. And if you want to sign off after previewing the Big 12 with us, that's fine too. But we appreciate you coming on, William, and talking some football with us. And I'm looking forward to Tuesday night's edition of Under the Bleachers. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, it definitely will. I think I'm going to bail now though, and I definitely thank you, Chris. I mean, getting up on a Saturday and enjoying some college football. It's been a
Yes,
minute. So
pitch me your ideas for Tuesday, because I have no idea like what to do with the thumbnail yet for Tuesday's show. Like what topics you and Brandis want to discuss. I have no idea.
yeah, she usually answers on Monday, but I'll put something together before then, and
All right, cool.
we'll have it figured out. So I
Sounds
appreciate being here, man.
no problem. Talk to you later.
All right, thanks, guys.
Wait, I almost clicked the end stream button. That would have been bad, but I didn't.
Oh, that would have done.
Yeah, but I didn't. I avoided clicking the button, and I avoid getting roasted by Joey. But let's dive into the division here. We got the AFC South and the NFC South. We'll dive into the AFC South first. I mean, Hall of Fame game was recently. The Texans blew out the Steelers last night. Let's talk about the Texans. Let's talk about Brad Noble's team. Then we'll talk about the Colts, Allison's team, and then we'll talk about the Jaguars, the team in Joey City. But yeah, it is interesting what's happening here.
I don't think that interesting is what's happening as how fast it's happening. So I think with this division.
Yeah, because you were expecting the Jaguars to rule this division for 1 to 2 years, and then for things to get interesting. And now, but instead, the Texans win the division in Stroud's rookie year, and now they go out, they spend a ton of money on free agents.
Yeah, and here's the thing, though. I've been saying the AFC was the competitive division in football, and it would be for a few years. And now here comes the AFC South saying, hold my beer.
I wouldn't go that far yet, because Will Levis is still in this division. It's coming if the Titans get Carson Becker, Shadur Sanders, it is coming. But it's not quite there yet to where they're ready to challenge the North. I feel that way more about the AFC East than the South because I'm confident Drake May is going to pan out. I'm not as confident in the Titans quarterback situation. And if Rodgers, Tua, Drake May pans out and Tua continues to have success, you can make the same argument about the AFC East down the road. So
It's real competitive, really fast, and that's the thing. It's not as interesting as what you were going to put it as it is interesting as how fast this is happening because nobody expected this to happen this fast.
they didn't.
I mean, there are people comparing Richardson for the Colts to Steve McNair.
Yeah, Chris Ballard in particular. That's why I went with the thumbnail for that. You know, I thought that was a cool thumbnail, and I felt like that was what warranted.
If I wasn't so high on Richardson coming out, I probably would have been offended by that comparison. But I was so high on him coming out, and even you said I was too high on him. So
I felt Stroud. I felt Bryce Young was going to be the best, followed by Stroud, followed by Richardson. But we're going to talk about all three today. We are. We're going to talk about all three today. So.
Yeah, so it's like, hey, you want to talk about a quarterback class? We talk about game 5 and 6.
And Will Levis was in that quarterback class too. So that's the top 4 quarterbacks in the 2023 draft. What are they going to do in year 2? We'll be discussing that today.
Yeah. This is a quarterback class we may be discussing if they keep on the way they and keep it on.
Yes. So the Texans, I'm looking at depth charts here. They are healthier on the offensive line compared to a year ago. And they've got Kenyon Green back at left guard, Tytus Howard's at right tackle, Juice Scruggs at center, Shaq Nate, Laramie Tunsil. We did not get to see what Stroud could do with a fully healthy offensive line. He's also got Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Diggs and Stroud were getting into an argument on the sideline during the preseason where Diggs it's only the first preseason game and Diggs is like, just get me the ball, CJ, get me the ball. And CJ's he's trying to empathize with Diggs, but you could tell he was uncomfortable. He did not want to deal with the drama that Diggs brings to the table.
And that's the exact reason why the Bills take it, because Diggs is a drama queen. Not a talent. He's not a talent, but the drama queen. What he's doing recently. He's doing nothing in his entire career. He gets tired of it.
And they've got 7 different receivers. They've got Noah Brown, Robert Woods, John Mechie, and Xavier Hutchinson. Okay, so they've got a lot of depth at receiver, and I think Colin Johnson was making some plays. Maybe that was for the Bears in that preseason game, but Case Keenum looked good. Davis Mills looked good. They have Schultz, Brevin, and Stover. This is a really deep Texans team. Jarrett Patterson's the backup center. Blake Fisher's the backup left tackle. So there's some talent there. They added Mixon. Damian Pierce is there. Andrew Beck is there. So there's just a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball with the Houston Texans, Joey.
Here's the thing. The Texans are already one of the top 3 teams in the AFC. The problem is, Devon Diggs, if what we saw in that game, and how Diggs is going as a young quarterback, looking like, what the hell, dude? I'm already to a review. That brings to one paradigm, where this may not have been a great game for the Texans. I was like, I have to put them down. And I'm like, we're glad you're here to help us. Not to create anarchy. Calm your demon and we're going to ship you off. The Bills gave him way more opportunities than I think he deserved. It's like, when you have those deep tendencies, hell no. I'm going to trade it for you. Not your count.
I do have the Texans. I'm going to look at the Texans defense and then tell you where I have them for the year. But they added Daniel Hunter to pair with Will Anderson. They replaced their defensive tackles, Malik Collins and Sheldon Rankins, with Fadu Kasi from the Jaguars and Mario Edwards from Seattle. They also added Tim Settle from Buffalo. I think they have more depth at defensive tackle, but I also don't think they have the high-end starters they had a year ago at defensive tackle. They have Christian Hunter at weak side linebacker.
I was going to use the word quality. You pretty much hit it on the head. So,
They don't have the quality starters. I mean, Fadu Kasi's decent. Mario Edwards Jr., he's a nice floor player, but he's nothing spectacular. I feel like Rankins just does more as a high-end starter, just as a quality starter. But, Aziz Al-Shahir is the middle linebacker, and Henry To'oTo'o is the Sam linebacker in 43 sets. So To'oTo'o will only see the field in 43 packages. Jimmy Stingley's the field corner. The boundary corner is not Okuda. It's Kamari Lassiter. Lassiter took the number 2 cornerback job from Okuda as a rookie. That is pretty impressive, and that changes things for the Texans, because that was my big objection with the Texans was, who's going to be that boundary corner? I I think Lassiter is a higher ceiling than Okudah.
I heard that yesterday, and I think that is great for the Texans because it's always good to have a two-man good corner. Because, you know, if you have three starting corners on the outside and you can move one on the inside, that is only a great problem.
Desmond King is the nickel, but they have Okudah. He's the dime. And C.J. Henderson's the quarter corner. He's the number 5 corner on the team. So I like Henderson as a quarter corner. I don't like him as a dime or nickel, but as a number 5 corner, I'm fine with Henderson as a number 5 corner in quarters packages. I'm fine with him in that role because I think he's serviceable in that role. The Texans also have Jerry Hughes and Barnett as backups to Hunter and Anderson. Dylan Horton too. But what's interesting is Eric Murray's the backup strong safety to Jimmy Ward. Jalen Petir is still the free safety, but Kalen Bullock's made so much progress, he's taken the second string free safety job from MJ Stewart. He's not starting, but he was able to get MJ Stewart demoted to third string as a rookie. That should say something about Kalen Bullock. So
because MJ Stewart is a guy I really like. He is a guy that is incredibly good. And he's a guy that I think could bring a lot to any team. And when you are beaten out by a rookie, I gotta look at that rookie and say, I mean, that's really impressive. So I really gotta give it to him.
yes, the Texans. I have the Houston Texans winning this division at 11-6. We're going to go through the schedule here. I do have the Colts beating the Texans in week 1. I have the Texans winning the next 7 games, though. Next 8 games. I have them beating Chicago, beating Minnesota on the road, beating Jacksonville, beating Buffalo, beating the Patriots, beating Green Bay in Green Bay, beating the Colts in week 8 at home, and beating the Jets on Thursday Night Football. So I have the Texans going 8-0 after losing the Colts. And if they beat the Colts in week 1, we're looking at a team that's potentially 9-0 heading into week 10 when they play Detroit. I do have Detroit winning that game, but it's in Houston. The Texans could very easily steal that game with 9 days to prepare for that game. They also get the Cowboys in Monday Night Football in Dallas. I think Dallas wins that. I like the Texans over the Titans, though, in Houston. I've got Houston sweeping the Titans. I've also got the Jaguars beating the Texans. I've got the Texans beating Miami at home, but I have the Texans losing to the Chiefs in Kansas City, and I have them losing to the Ravens in Houston on Christmas Day. So I've got Houston at 11-6. But if they can beat the Lions and Ravens, they could potentially end up at 13-4. And if they can beat the Colts on the road, they could be 14-3. I don't think they do enough to get the 1 seed, but they could end up as the 2 seed ultimately. So, but I have them currently as my 3 seed in the AFC. And I have them playing the Jets in the wild card round, and I have the Jets winning that game. So if they go 11-6 and they lose to the Jets in the wild card, that after beating them in the regular season, that Diggs will probably throw a fit, and the Texans will just move on from Diggs. Because they bought out every year of his contract except this year. They front-loaded the contract so they could just buy out his contract after this season.
because they were in contention for the Super Bowl. But let's face it, look at it for what it is. This is an even. And I'm not talking about even a good way. I'm not talking about even like a recent Franklin. I'm talking about Diva in, when I give you the ball. I'm talking about Celtic Diva. You know, the little pamper children type Diva. You're talented. You're going to got your talent. But they're going to get upset if they don't get their touches. How much money are you making? I don't care any of my touches. You're the highest paid player on the team. I don't care any of my touches. That's it. And that's the problem. And that's something I don't think the Texans are going to put up with for long. You saw what happened with Sean Watson after 2020 when he was like the third best quarterback in the NFL. He said, I'm going to hold out.
We got somebody in.
Fine. And that's what it is with the Texans. With the Texans, it's like, oh, you're going to be a diva? You want to hold out? You want to cry about mine? Guess what? Fine. Go sit on the sideline. We'll find a way to get rid of you at some point. And that's what the Texans are, the team. So, I don't think this is for the Texans. And I don't think Texans are good for him. Because Texans, as much as I despise how the Texans deal with a lot of issues within their team, I can personally say this. They don't put up with the team that. And that's one place I will give them credit.
Yep. Next team we're going to preview is the Colts. And I'm going to go through this. 5 reasons why the Colts will win the AFC East. This is not me. This is my friend who's a Colts fan. Number 1, Anthony Richardson is going to dominate with a capital D. We're looking at 3,500 passing yards and 1,000 rushing yards for Richardson. He is going to be that good this year, and he's going to break out and stay healthy. Number 2, Jonathan Taylor is going to be the bell cow.
I have to agree with one thing there. I think the rushing yards are overinflated simply because when he gets hit, he does not have the body. Everybody, I've heard people compare Steve McNair, as I said before, he does not have the body of Steve McNair. McNair can take those hits. His play style is like McNair. He's going to have to adjust his play style to stay home. He is not 245 pounds a month like McNair was. So that's, I don't think he's going to, I think he can have 500-600 yards rushing. 1,000? I don't think so.
Yeah, I was going to wait until I read through the list and then comment on what benchmarks are realistic. But number 2, Jonathan Taylor is going to have 2,000 rushing yards. With Evan Hull failing to win the number 2 running back job, you have Trey Benson, Trey Sermon, and Tyler Goodson as your backups. Trey Sermon was a 4th-string running back on the Eagles last year. So Jonathan Taylor is going to be the bell cow, and as long as he's healthy, he is capable of having another 2,000-yard season. Reason number 3, this offensive line. This offensive line, just very good, and you have Raymond, Nelson, Kelly, Fries, and Smith back first time since 06-07 when the Colts had all 5 starters back on the offensive line entering a season, and they also have really good depth. They've got Blake Freeland, Josh Sills, Tanner Bortolini, Danny Pinter and Matt Gonsalves as the backups. And they've got really good receiver depth with Pierce, Pittman, Jones, Downs, Adonai Mitchell. My friend didn't mention all the players. I did because I wanted to look at the entire Colts roster as a whole. But, with Josh Downs missing the first month, Adonai Mitchell's going to come in. And if he dominates, we could be looking at Pittman, Downs, and Mitchell as the starters heading into October. But the Colts offensive line, it's the best it's been in a while. My friend believes the Colts will finish in the top 10 in both pass blocking and run blocking. Number 4, Leatu Latu. Leatu Latu has been taking first-team reps with Kwity Paye. And my friend believes Latu gets 12.5 sacks and wins Defensive Rookie of the Year. My Colts friend also believes DeForest Buckner has 15 sacks. If all 5 of these things happen, Richardson gets 4,500 total yards, 3,500 passing, 1,000 rushing. Jonathan Taylor gets 2,000 rushing yards. The Colts offensive line finishes in the top 10 in pass blocking and run blocking. Latu has 12.5 sacks. Buckner has 15, and Kwity Paye has 7 to 11 sacks. How many games can the Colts win if all of those things come together? And honestly, Joey, I don't think all 5 of Allison's predictions become true, but if I think 2 of them can become true. Now, I'm with you on Richardson. I think the benchmarks for Richardson, that is a lot to ask. I could see the Jonathan Taylor thing happening, but that's because the Colts really don't have a good RB2. But it comes down to Taylor staying healthy. I could see Latu getting 12.5 sacks. Buckner getting 15 feels like a stretch. And the offensive line finishing the top 10 in pass blocking and run blocking. I could see top 15. I can't see top 10 both. So that's where I stand with the Colts.
Do you remember how I used to talk about the Browns when they year in, year out and put all these outlandish things out there? Yeah, that's what she sounds like right there. The only difference is at least half of them have potential to come true. Where with the Browns and me back in the day, not so much. So, but that's what it sounds like.
Yeah. And this isn't a bad list. It's 5 reasons why the Colts.
But does she have a point in the Colts being able to win the division? Absolutely. Colts do have a very good front on defense. They do have a much improved offensive line. Richardson's going to be healthy. Okay, they almost made the playoffs last year without Richardson. Richardson's healthy. He's going to be dynamic. I had him, if you remember, I think I had him as my number 1 quarterback that year when he came out last year.
I had Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and Richardson as my top 3, but it was very close between the 3. But all 3 guys literally checked every box for me.
So, for me, it wouldn't be something that I'd be upset about if Colts won the division. It's not something that wasn't unheard of. But to say, well, if all those things she said come true, Colts be the number 1 team in the AFC. That ain't happening. So,
Even if all those things come true, I think the best case scenario for the Colts is they're the number 1 seed and they're outed in the divisional round like the Titans due to a shitty secondary. The Colts secondary is bad. I mean, they have 2 assets in Julian Blackmon and Juju Brents. That's it. Kenny Moore is decent, but Jalen Jones has sucked as the number 2 corner. Dallas Flowers is being eased back in because he had an ACL injury last year. They want to ease him back in. He's healthy, but they're easing him back in, giving him second-team reps. Jalen Jones is getting absolutely torched by Michael Pittman Jr. and these rookie receivers, Downs in year 2, before he was injured, Mitchell. Jalen Jones has no business on the first team, and it's gotten so bad at free safety that Gus Bradley is literally speechless. He can't decide whether to start Rodney Thomas, Nick Cross, Ronnie Harrison Jr., or Trevor Denbo. All four have been equally underwhelming in training camp to the point where Gus Bradley sounds like a Pokemon. That's how underwhelming these free safeties have been for the Colts in training camp so far. If you're so underwhelming that you make Gus Bradley sound like a Pokemon, you might need to find a new profession. I'm not ready to give up on Nick Cross yet, but, it's not looking good from what I'm hearing.
Here's something that I never understood. Why is Ronnie Harrison a free safety?
He's the backup strong safety on our lads, but the Colts have tried Cross at free safety, Thomas at free safety, Ronnie Harrison at free safety, and Denbo. None of them have worked there. Colts are just trying to find a long-term guy at free safety, and they've gone through 4 different guys in camp, and they don't like any of them.
I can understand them throwing people at the wall, but Harrison's always been more of a strong safety that's kind of played out of position, and at times has been excellent, and other times looks like he's out of position. Why do they keep trying to put a square peg in a round hole there? I can understand the Colts if they're desperate at free safety.
They are desperate. They're going through 4 different guys of the 6 on their roster, and they don't like any of them at free safety.
It's definitely a situation to look into and to keep track of.
I think the Colts can get the 1 seed, but they will lose in the divisional round like the Titans did because of their secondary. Even if all of the Colts predictions come true.
The big thing is, if they're in the NFC, they can probably get away with that. In the AFC, let's look at what they got. The Chiefs.
The Ravens, the Bengals.
The Ravens. They've got
the Bills.
They're going to run 3 or 4 receivers now, which means the free safety is going to be
Bengals, Io Civis has a lot of rapport with Joe Burrow is at number 3, despite losing Tyler Boyd. The Jets, Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, Alan Lazard, Corley, they're 40 at receiver. If you think about it, the Jets.
And Aaron Rodgers was that team down the middle. You'll take advantage
Conklin,
of it.
yeah.
Free safety position, if you're in the NFC, you can get away with having a subpar free safety. In the AFC, ain't gonna happen.
That's why I say, even if all 5 of Allison's Colts predictions become true, at best, this is a 1 seed that loses in the divisional round like the Titans. Yeah, they've got Robigos.
The Colts are a team I love. Colts are a team I believe are a year away.
Yeah, I've got the Colts at 9-8. I have them beating the Texans in week 1. I have them losing the Packers in week 2. I have them losing the Bears because the Colts don't have a good number 2 corner. They don't have a good free safety. What do you think Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Romo Dunes, and Cole Met are going to do against Colts free safety in week 3? I like Caleb Williams to upset in that matchup. I think Richardson beats the Steelers in week 4. He plays. If Flacco plays, Pittsburgh can steal that. But Colts, Jaguars, and Jacksonville, I like the Jags. I think the Colts beat the Titans to get to 3-3. I think the Colts beat the Dolphins to get to 4-3. And then I have the Colts losing 3 in a row actually have the Colts losing 4 in a row after a 4-3 start to Houston on the road, Minnesota on the road, Buffalo at home. That was a pick'em game for me, but I went with the Bills because I feel like since it's indoors, Josh Allen can do just enough to go toe-to-toe with Richardson. If the Colts played outdoors, I'd probably pick the Colts. And the Jets, I think the Jets beat the Colts at home, so So the Colts go from 4-3 to 4-7. They finally beat the Lions and the Patriots to get back to 6-7. They lose to Denver to fall to 6-8, but they beat the Titans at home, the Giants on the road, and the Jaguars at home to end the year at 9-8. They're going to either have to beat Denver or Minnesota with McCarthy in Minnesota to make the playoffs. I'm not saying it can't happen, or Caleb Williams and the Bears in week 3. If they can beat one of those three, they could make things interesting. But I also think it's too much to ask at this point, which is why I say they're a year away. So it sounds like we both have the Colts at 9-8 missing the playoffs. I know you don't have a simulator updated, that's fine, but from what I'm getting from Joey is that we both have the Colts at 9-8 missing the playoffs, and they're a year away. Once they fix the secondary, though, I think they're going to be the team to beat in the division next year because they're going to have an easier strength of schedule than the Texans. And that's one thing that's going to work in their favor. And
I think this division is difficult to predict.
they get the NFC West next year. They get the AFC West and the NFC West next year. And the second or third place teams in the AFC North and the AFC East division. So that is good news for the Colts. Colts actually benefit from next year's strength of schedule, probably more so than the Texans do. It just depends on whether them or the Jaguars finish second in the division. All right, but I'm going to get to the Jaguars now. But we both have the Colts. I think I've got the Colts at 9-8 missing the playoffs. I'm guessing Joey does too, but a lot of it is going to depend on matchups and schedule where they ultimately end up finishing. And Flacco will start if Richardson does suffer any missed time with injuries. So
Yeah, and that's the thing. You like to talk about this. Well, Colts got psychedelic. So, yes, Colts may not, they're going to be hurt if Richardson gets hurt, but at least they won't be hurt if Richardson gets hurt.
all right, we're on to Jacksonville here. Preseason games are going to start in an hour on NFL Network. But yeah, the Jaguars, I have the Jaguars starting the year with a loss to my whoops. Sorry, guys. I meant to go through the depth charts first. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to reveal spoilers. That was not my intention here. I was trying to get the depth charts loaded here. But anyway, looking at the Jaguars, they're going to have Trevor Lawrence. They're going to have a wide receiver tandem of Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr., and Christian Kirk. ETN's going to be the bell cow. Cam Robinson at left tackle, Ezra Cleveland at left guard, Morse at center, Scherf at right guard, and Anton Harrison at right tackle. I love their offensive tackle depth. They've got Shatley. This says Shatley's third string, but I think Shatley's ahead of Blake Hance on the actual Jaguars real-life depth chart. Fortner's the backup center, and Cooper Hodges is the backup right guard. I actually like the Jaguars' depth on the offensive line. But if anything happens to Evan Ingram, the receivers, or ETN, this team is fucked. Same with Trevor Lawrence. There is a lack of depth behind the star players in Jacksonville this year. I think offensive line is probably the only position the Jaguars are deep at right now. Yeah, they've got Tank Bigsby, Ernest Johnson. Those aren't bad floor players, but they don't move the needle in terms of star power like ETN does. Same could be said with Mac Jones and Bethard. They don't move the needle like Trevor Lawrence. So that, for me, is the big issue with the Jaguars' offense, Joey. And you can agree to disagree with me if you want, but I think if Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr., Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Trevor Lawrence, or Travis Etienne gets injured, the Jaguars are in trouble. Because while the backups are decent, they don't have those high ceilings that you want from a starter. So an 18-week, 17-week starter, they don't have that. And that's going to be what keeps the Jaguars from making the playoffs if somebody goes down. If they're healthy, they could take back this division, but it's a big thing. They got to get some injury help from their division, and they got to stay completely healthy. It's possible, but I also don't think it's very likely either. What do you want to add to that before I get to the defense?
Here's the thing. The Jaguars got better in the offseason. They got a lot better in the offseason. The problem is, the rest of the division outside of the Titans got better in the offseason as well. So you gotta pay attention and look at who actually got better than the other teams. Because the Jaguars, they could very easily win this division. I think their receiving core got better. I think Trevor Lawrence has shown.
They got more top heavy, but I don't think they got better. They added Duvernay to replace Agnew, and he's a nice floor player, but he's not a guy I can count on for 17 games. The Jaguars only have 3 receivers in Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas, and Kirk that they can count on for 17 games. If one of those guys gets injured in the preseason,
Better than they had last year. They're still better than they had last year.
they had Ridley last year, and they had Kirk.
Yeah, and Ridley really disappointed. Ridley was a hit or miss. You throw it to him 50% of the time, you catch him 50% of the time, you miss it. Ridley was not, and here's the thing about Ridley. The Jags wanted to extend him, but they weren't going to give him. But when he came back with the offer that he was given, they were like, no, you take that. $97 million, they weren't going to pay him. It wasn't worth that. And I knew from seeing him live last year. I saw from seeing him on TV last year a lot. He was a good receiver. He wasn't what he was built to be, and he's not what he was paid to be. So,
Ridley does have a higher ceiling than Gabe Davis, but both guys are hit or miss.
And printing him as a better version of Gabe Davis. But the big thing is, Trevor Lawrence is best when he's throwing down the field, not over the middle. What they do, what Gabe Davis and Thomas best at, getting down the field. So in that sense, you have to realize that they have upgraded.
Yeah, it felt like the Jaguars were too deep at receiver last year. It did. Like, they had Ingram, but it felt like the Jaguars were too deep at receiver. They're 3 deep this year, but they lack depth if injuries occur. And last year, the Jaguars were only 2 deep. So they upgraded in that respect, but I still don't think they have the depth that you want at receiver from a Super Bowl team. But the reason they don't have a lot of depth on offense is because they have a ton of depth on defense, Joey. I mean, Allen and Walker are the 43 defensive ends. Gibson and Tyler Lacey are the backup defensive ends. Hamilton and Armstead are the defensive tackles. You have Roy Robertson, Harris, and Ledbetter as the backup defensive tackles. You have Mason Smith and Jefferson as the third-string defensive tackles. There is a lot of depth on this Jacksonville defensive tackle group.
And here's the thing. A lot of people don't Aaron Walker. A lot of people want Aaron Walker. So Walker and Allen are the top two pass rushing linebacker combination in the NFL.
Well, they're moving to a 43, so they're defensive ends now.
30 sacks last year, I think it was.
Yeah, they're defensive ends now. They're switching their scheme from a 34 to a 43. So they're going to go from being edge rushers at rush linebacker to edge rushers at defensive end this year. So that is going to be. Both guys played in a 43 defense in college. So I'm not worried about the transition. Both guys played in a 43 defense in college.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't think there's going to be any transition as far as.
I think the big thing is if they can get last year, I think they had 28 or 30 sacks or something like that combined, top tandem in the NFL. If they do that from a defensive end perspective, holy crap. I don't think anybody's going to score against them. Because you won't be able to get anything off. Those guys will just dominate.
Yep.
100%. So if they make that transition and have the same production, that's scary.
And they have depth at defensive tackle. They've got depth at linebacker too. Olakun and Devin Lloyd are the starting linebackers in a 4-2-5, but Chad Muma is the Sam linebacker in a 43 defense. Now, they also have Ventrell Miller, Abdullah, and Muma for depth in a 4-2-5 as well. So they have a number of combinations they can deploy with these linebackers.
Yeah, and Muma is interesting because Muma is a guy that can be a starter, but he's also shown a little bit of inconsistency. He's showing moments of brilliance, moments of inconsistency. So interesting this year where they can put it all together.
He'll play situationally as a Sam linebacker. He might start some games, and he might be in the starting lineup as a Sam linebacker, but do I think he'll be an every down player? No, because with the 4-2-5, with teams running a combination of 43 and 4-2-5 now, or 34 and 3-3-5, linebacker, if you're not a right outside linebacker or a middle linebacker, you're not guaranteed to be an every down player. You're a situational player. In today's NFL, that is the reality. Muma will probably play a lot, but he might also be a situational player. The Jaguars, they paid Tyson Campbell, but they brought in Ronald Darby on a 2-year contract. Darnell Savage is the nickel corner. Monteric Brown is the dime corner. And you have Jerry Jones and Christian Braswell competing for the cornerback job. You also have Cisco and Antonio Johnson as the starting safeties. My guess is Savage will move from nickel to free safety next year when Cisco's a UFA, but he'll play nickel this year. And they also have Daniel Thomas and Andrew Wingard as the backup safeties. So there's a lot of depth there in the secondary. Jacksonville, the reason they don't have a lot of depth on offense is because they focused on putting most of the depth players on defense and relying on the offense to stay healthy, which can work, but it's a risky strategy. And if any of your star players on offense get injured, it's going to be tough.
It is a risky strategy, but you can't say it's a bad strategy because
I never said it was a bad strategy, but it's a risky one.
definitely with all the great offenses in the AFC, I mean, I think the Jaguars, if they have a good draft this next year and solidify their offense, their defense is great. They can still win the division this year.
But I don't think they're a Super Bowl team. They could still win the division. Maybe they get to a divisional round again, but I don't think they're a Super Bowl team right now. I'm not saying they're a bad team. I just don't think if they won the division again, I don't think they'd get to the Super Bowl. Maybe they get back to the AFC Championship like they did with Bortles, but I think that would be the peak for the Jaguars. I just don't see them winning the AFC with the lack of depth on offense. but I think they can win the division again.
The AFC is a lot better than it was when the Jags had Bortles. So, I mean, we're looking at an AFC where 10, 12 teams make playoffs.
I've got 11 teams with 9 wins, Joey. That should tell you the strength of competition in this conference. Cam Little's your kicker, and Logan Cook is your punter. Duvernay replaces Agnew as the return specialist. I'm going to stop screen sharing, and we're going to go to the Jaguars' schedule now. I've got the Dolphins beating Jacksonville in week 1. I've got the Jaguars beating the Browns in week 2, but I have the Jaguars losing road games to Buffalo and Houston. They beat the Colts at home to get to 2-3. They lose to Caleb Williams. They're 2-4. I think they beat the Patriots if Brissett starts. They lose to Green Bay at home. They lose to the Eagles. They're 3-6 entering week 10. But they beat the Vikings to get to 4-6. They lose the Lions. They're 4-7 entering the bye week. But they go on a winning streak near the end. They beat the Texans at home. They beat the Titans on the road. They beat the Jets at home. They beat the Raiders on the road. They beat the Titans at home. They go on a winning streak, a 5-game winning streak to get to 9-7. After starting 4-7, they go on a little winning streak. They get to 9-7, but they lose to the Colts in week 18 and end the year at 9-8 and miss the playoffs. But, they are one of these teams that as long as they have 4 or 5 wins by the bye week, they should be able to pull out 9 wins. If they can get more than 4 or 5 wins by the bye week, because their strength of schedule is more like 2 years ago when they had all their easy opponents near the end of the year and all their tough opponents in the beginning when they won the division. Their schedule aligns more with that. I know you want to add something, Joey, so go ahead, add what you want to add, and then we'll get to the Titans.
I think the schedule it's a difficult schedule. I think the first 2 weeks are going to be telling. I think they could win both games, but I also think they could get blown out at both games. But they've got a pretty difficult schedule. And I think, like you said, 9-8, very possible, but you've got a bunch of 9-8 teams. How will it may end up whether they make the playoffs or not by head-to-head or some other type of tiebreaker?
Yeah, the Jaguars are listed at number 8. They are my number 1 9-8 team. We'll see what happens though, because right now I've got the Chargers at 10-7, but I've got the Browns, Jaguars, Colts, and the Dolphins, who we're going to discuss next week, all in that 9-8 conversation. So that's going to make things very interesting for this conference. And we're going to get to the Titans now. We'll go over the Titans depth chart here. Titans are interesting. We'll get to the Titans. Titans are coming up next here, and this is the last AFC South team, and then we'll get to the NFC South. But yeah, I mean, Will Levis is a starter. They also have Mason Rudolph, the backup, and Malik Willis is the third stringer. I think the Titans do need a true upgrade at quarterback. I don't trust Latham at left tackle. The scouts wanted Fashanu, but Bill Callahan wanted Latham, and Rand Carthen sided with Bill Callahan over the scouts. Some of the scouts are pissed off, but they'll learn to live with it. Skoronski's the left guard. Cushenberry from Denver is the center. Petit Frere is back. You got Hopkins, Ridley, and Boyd as your top 3 receivers. Hopkins may miss the first 2 to 6 weeks. I mean, he did get injured in camp. They have Traylon Burks as their number 4. Westbrook Akini goes from being the number 3 receiver, actually number 2 receiver 2 years ago behind Burks, to being the number 5 receiver this year after being the number 3. And Kyle Phillips is the number 6. They also have Jaquan Jackson. So I didn't mention Kyle Phillips in my season preview because Jackson was ahead of him on the depth chart a few weeks ago. Now it looks like Phillips is ahead of Jackson, but that's a potential roster spot competition. Latham, Skoronski, Cushenberry, Redunds, and Brunskill are competing for the right guard job. Gerard Christian, John Ojukwu are the 2 backup tackles, and then Jalen Duncan's the 3rd string right tackle. Leroy Watson's the 3rd string left tackle. I don't know how I feel about the Titans. I think they're going to rely heavily on the running game. Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, and Hassan Haskins. I think the Titans are going to rely heavily on the running game and their weapons to try to bail out Levis. And, the Titans, as far as their defense goes, they have Jeffrey Simmons. They added Javondre Sweat in the draft. He's going to be a nose tackle, day 1 starter. He's actually beating out Keandre Coburn, his mentor at Texas, for the nose tackle job. And Sebastian Joseph Day is the 34 left end. I think the Titans have better defensive line than a year ago with more nose tackle depth. They do not have Arden Key for the first 6 games. He got suspended. Rashad Weaver's going to start next to Harold Landry. Kenneth Murray and Jack Gibbons are going to be the starters. Cedric Gray's the number 3 linebacker. Caleb Murphy and Weaver are going to be the backups when Arden Key returns. But, Awuzie, Snead, McCreary are your top 3 corners. Amani Hooker and Diggs are the starting safeties. Jamal Adams is the backup. He's the backup strong safety. Molden's the backup free safety. And the Titans literally don't have any depth at corner if anything happens to Awuzie, Snead, or McCreary. They did have Caleb Farley as their dime corner. Farley got injured again with a concussion, and now he's listed as 3rd string on the depth chart after once entering the preseason as number 4 corner. So, I mean, just looking at the Titans, I'm not encouraged by what I see. And I'm going to keep this Titans thing brief here. I have the Titans with the worst record in the league. I have them beating Jacoby Brissett in week 9. That is my only win for the entire season. I have the Titans going 1-16. And if Drake May starts by week 9, I think the Titans go 0-17. That is how bad I think the Titans are.
The big thing that I look at when I look at the Titans, I look at their coaches. I look at Callahan, and I'm like,
The 2 most important positions on the positional value pyramid are the quarterback and left tackle. And I think the Titans rank 32 out of 32 in both quarterback and left tackle. That is why I loathe this team this year.
well, here's the thing. Here's what's going to, my opinion on why they aren't going to go winless. And that's Callahan.
I think they can beat the Patriots if Brissett starts, but that's the only game I see that's winnable on the schedule. I have them losing to the Bears in week 1, and to be fair, I've got 10 games up on the site. I have the Titans losing the Bears 28-14. I'm taking the under because right now the over-under for Titans-Bears is 42.5. That is way too freaking high. With all the turnovers Will Levis and Caleb Williams are going to have, that is way too freaking high of an over-under, Joey. So I've got the Bears winning 28-14. My friend Bill Dozier thinks that I've got the Bears scoring too many points. He's got the Bears winning 21-18 in more of a defensive game. I can see the thought process and respect it, even though we disagree on the result. I can see where he's coming from. They're going to lose the Bears. I think Caleb's going to win that. But the thing is, if those there's going to be turnovers in that Titans-Bears game. And if the Titans can turn those turnovers into touchdowns, that's going to be the key to winning. And that's going to be the key to winning a lot of games if you're the Titans. You got to be top 5. If you want to go 7-10, you got to be top 5 in turnovers to points. You got to have a top 5 defense when it comes to converting turnovers into points if you want to win and be competitive with Will Levis.
This is why I say I trust the Shanahan, because their offense, they're going to have an offensive line that nobody has any respect for, but somehow is very, very good. Not great, not overwhelming, but very good, because they will emphasize that offensive line in that running game, and they will put the passing game in where it needs to be. And because they know with a reloading team, an unproven quarterback, the Callahans know the best way to rehabilitate that is through the running game. And you have the best offensive line coach in NFL history and one of the best running game coordinators in NFL history, and Bill Callahan saying, this is what we're going to do to keep them losing every game. And Brian's going to do it because he trusts his dad, because his dad's one of the best to ever do it. You know, and who's going to argue that? I can see the Titans squeaking out 2 wins, maybe 3.
They do let's go through the schedule, because I have the Titans winning 1 game against the Patriots. They play the Jets at home in week 2. They probably lose that game. They play the Packers in week 3. They probably lose that. They play the Dolphins on the road on Monday night. They did beat the Dolphins on the road last year. It was one of the signature wins by Will Levis. So, not saying they can't win that game, but I think the Dolphins have revenge on their mind. They get a bye week before playing the Colts in week 6 at home. That's a game they could steal if Flacco's in the lineup and Richardson's injured. I think the Colts win, though. The Bills, the Lions on the road, they lose both of those. I think they beat the Patriots. They play the Chargers on the road. I think the Chargers win that game. They get the Vikings at home in week 11. If McCarthy is starting, I like the Vikings. If Sam Darnold's still starting, there's a chance Will Levis outduels Sam Darnold due to the fact that Darnold is seeing ghosts in Tennessee. That's possible. It's unlikely, but it is possible they could steal that game. If Darnold is still starting in week 11, Levis might be able to steal that game at home.
Something wrong. Darnold sucks.
I don't think the Vikings are going to start McCarthy until like week 7 or week 9. I think Darnold beats the 49ers in week 2, and if he beats the Giants, that'll extend his job security even more.
The joke we got going at work is that he would run faster. Mario running away from Donkey Kong, or Sam Darnold running away from them.
Yeah, when you think of Sam Darnold, Joey, you think of Luigi and Luigi's Mansion, and Luigi's trying to vacuum all the ghosts, except the only difference between Luigi and Sam Darnold is Sam Darnold just runs out of the mansion all scared. He can't even vacuum the ghosts. He just runs out of the mansion scared, whereas Luigi at least attempts to vacuum the ghosts. Sometimes he succeeds, sometimes he fails, but at least he makes an effort to vacuum the ghost, whereas Darnold, he can't vacuum the ghost. Yeah, pretty much.
So I can't
I don't think he makes it to week 11, though. I think McCarthy probably starts by then, so I give the Vikings a win. The Titans play the Texans in week 12 and the Commanders in week 13. I like the Commanders in week 13 at home against the Titans. Titans do get the Bengals and Jaguars at home. Maybe Callahan tries to beat his former team, and then they get the Colts and Jaguars on the road and the Texans in week 18. But that's a brutal schedule. I have them at 1-16, but I think if Drake May starts in week 9, 0-17 is on the table for Tennessee. But right now, I've got the Titans at 1-16 because I just do not have the audacity to pick a team to go 0-17. I don't.
I think the Texas game's a trap game. I think the Texans have every potential to be rolling at that point. I think they're a young team. They have every potential to let down.
If the Texans are rested, the other thing is the Texans might already know they're the 3 seed heading into week 18. So they might just rest their starters for the playoffs. And if that's the case, the Titans can steal that game. And
if the Texans aren't ready for a team to say, screw it, and just let it all out, they're going to get beat.
Tommy Callahan had this to say about the Titans. He's good. Hop will be good to go. Right side is in work in progress for sure. Sweat may win defensive player of the year, bro. That is bold, Tommy Callahan. That is bold. T'Vondre Sweat. So because not only are you picking him to win defensive rookie of the year, you're picking him to win defensive player of the year. Not even Lawrence Taylor and Luke Kuechly won defensive player and defensive rookie of the year in the same season. They both won defensive player of the year in their second seasons after their rookie years. But you're picking T'Vondre Sweat to win defensive player of the year, not just rookie of the year, defensive player of the year. Tommy, that is bold, man. I got to give you credit for that.
I have all the respect in the world for T'Vondre Sweat. I thought he was overdrafted, but still I thought he was super talented. At the same time, that's a hell of a statement, and I don't really agree with it.
Maybe he's a defensive rookie of the year finalist like Kobe Turner, but I think that's the best case scenario.
Yeah, it's like, and we thought me putting $50 on the Browns next Super Bowl was not Landon. I think I just stopped speaking out Landon. When it comes to that prediction about defense rookie year and defensive player of the year, I just stopped speaking out Landon.
But this is why we pull up the comments, Joey. I mean, you've got so much fun in the AFC South. Brad Noble's a Texans fan. My girlfriend's a Colts fan. You live in Jacksonville, and we got Tommy Callahan picking Sweat to win Defensive Player of the Year. We needed something entertaining when it came to the Titans. Tommy, thank you for providing that. Thank you. I mean that.
Yes, thank you so much.
We needed
It makes me feel so much better.
We needed a reason to be entertained about the Titans, and you gave us one. And then he replied, no, and what the fuck when discussing the Titans schedule. So, I love it. Thank you. All right. I'm going to pull up the Falcons here. They are my pick to win the NFC South, but they just got hit hard by the injury bug. Rondale Moore's knee injury is a season-ending injury. He is out for the year. So the Falcons traded Desmond Ridder for Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore is out for the year. So Ray McLeod, who's a good backup, not a good starter, is now the slot receiver. And then you have Josh Ollie, Kaderil Hodge, and Casey Washington. They also have James Washington competing for a roster spot. Austin Mack, they do have some guys, but Yeah. I mean, the Falcons did not have a lot of depth at receiver behind London Mooney and Rondale Moore, and it's one reason I said the Falcons are really volatile, because you look at their offensive line. They have Jake Matthews at left tackle, Bergeron at left guard, Dahlman at center, Lidstrom at right guard, McGarry at right tackle. Jovan Gwynn, a South 7th-round pick, is the only backup that they drafted. And the rest of the guys are undrafted free agents. And you know what happens if Storm Norton, you know what happens if Jake Matthews or McGarry gets injured, bicep injury like Slater a few years ago? It means Storm Norton would start. And the last time Storm Norton started, the Jaguars went crazy in SoFi Stadium. So the idea of Storm Norton starting at either tackle spot should frighten you if you're a Falcons fan. It really should. I think the Falcons, they don't have the depth at tight end that they did a year ago when they had McCole Pruitt and Jonnu Smith behind Pitts. They still have good running back depth with Bijan, Algier, Avery Williams, Jace McClellan. I think they're deeper at running back than they were a year ago, despite losing Cordell Patterson. That should say something. They're still going to be run heavy, but they've got Cousins. They've got Penix as the backup, and Heineke's the third stringer. And Penix actually looked good in the preseason last night. So, I mean, Penix, it's an interesting situation. And if Michael Penix makes it to round 17 of my fantasy draft, I might just pick him as like a handcuff pick. Because, look, if Penix pans out and I use a keeper on him from every year, that means I get him until 2034. From 2024 to 2033, he's my quarterback for the next 9 years after this season. So that means I get, and Penix is 24. So if he becomes good and I can keep him for up to 10 years, he'll probably decline after that 10th year if he's still in the league by that point. But, it's a low risk, high reward scenario. But, from a fantasy perspective, from a keeper league perspective, if Penix falls to 161 in the final round of the draft, and you've already drafted your defensive kicker, you can get Penix, you can stash him, and it only costs a 17th round pick to keep him. And then if he does good enough to start by 2026, it only costs a 15th round pick to keep him. And you're giving up nothing at that point. And if you get a quarterback, it's worth it, because Mitch drafted CJ Stroud in the 12th round, the same round I got Zay Flowers. Mitch now can keep Stroud until 2030. Okay? That's his quarterback until 2030, and he doesn't have to give him a first round pick in Superflex to keep Stroud. That's a win. Because next year it's only going to cost a 10th round pick.
More than anything was their coach. Now their coach is gone.
They don't have as much depth on the offensive line. They did lose Rondale Moore to a season-ending injury, so they're not going to have a good slot receiver. So teams with 3 corners are going to be able to beat them. Luckily,
they do have a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
They upgraded their coach by default. I don't even know how their coach is going to be, but he's got to be better than his predecessor. So they improved their coaching staff by default, and so they are much improved overall. And so I've got to look at it and say, look, these young receivers are a year older. They actually have competent coaching now. Rondale Moore is unfortunate, but at the same time, you got to believe coaching above what they had last year and a much better quarterback situation is so win out. And so they're going to be better than they were last year, simply because
Yeah.
That's going to be an improvement as well. So, I mean, I think Atlanta is going to be firmly in line to challenge Tampa Bay for this division.
Yeah. The thing is, though, the Falcons do not have a sack artist when it comes to pass rusher. They have Grady Jarrett, David Onyemeta, Zach Harrison on the defensive line. They have Rook or Horho as the backup nose tackles. Kentavious Street and Taquan Grammer, the backup defensive ends. Dorless is a third-string defensive end. So is Zion Logue. And they have Eddie Goldman as their third-string nose tackle. So I think this is the deepest the Falcons have been on the defensive line in quite some time. They don't have an edge rusher that's a sack artist. Troy Anderson and Caden Ellis are starting at inside linebacker. JT Bertrand, and Nate Landman are the backup linebackers. I actually think the Falcons' run defense is going to be a top 15 run defense, but I think their pass rush is still going to be bottom 7, bottom 5.
Under the radar, overlooked, and his missed so much.
You got that star in Jarrett, you got other solid starters, and you got good backups and good third stringers behind those starters if those third stringers make the team. So I think defensive line's a position Atlanta's deep at, like very deep at. And they're deep at inside linebacker too, despite being awful at edge rusher. So I think they can be a top 15 run defense, Joey, but they're also going to be one of the worst pass rushing units in the league. And Atlanta was Grady Jarrett was a 5th round pick in the 2015 draft. He was a 5th round pick, and Falcons basically kept him.
Yeah, and he's one of the best defensive tackles in the league. So it may be selfish on my part and being selfish for Grady Jarrett. One of the reasons I hope Atlanta make the playoffs. I don't hope that they make it over the Bucs. I hope both teams make it. Probably going to happen. But I hope they make it because of Grady Jarrett. I mean, he deserves the spotlight. He's one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL, and everybody just
that's the thing. It's true. Mike Hughes is the boundary corner. Mike Hughes would not be Mike Hughes was an awful nickel corner on the Chiefs, and he was an awful dime corner on the Lions. So what the heck? Mike Hughes is starting over Clark Phillips and D. Alford. But the coaching staff and Raheem Morris has just been that blown away with Hughes in training camp. Hughes is not a guy who wows me as a number 2 corner. He sucked as a nickel on the Chiefs. He sucked as a dime on the Lions last year. But, he's wowed this coaching staff.
Coaches in the NFL, and they're going to now head coaches. So if he can bring the best out of a nickel and dime corner to get him into a strong position on boundary, I mean, that just reinforces how good of a defensive back coach he is. I mean, if he can get the Falcons to have one of the best defensive backfields in the NFL, that just shows, hey, you know what? He had a bad situation his first time as a head coach. Now he's in a better situation, and he gets to kill off that he is one of the best defensive coaches in the NFL.
Yeah.
I don't think that'll happen, but it is a distinct possibility that he.
I think without Dave Canales, I have the Falcons at 8 and 9, and I have the Panthers and Buccaneers both at 7 and 10. It's the Dave Canales effect. Dave Canales is Kevin Stefanski with Sean McVay's vitality and testosterone. Okay, that's Dave Canales. Dave Canales is Stefanski with Sean McVay's vitality. That's a lethal combination. I think you're downplaying how lethal that combination is. Maybe I'm overselling how good Canales is too. That's also a possibility.
I think you're overselling a little bit. I don't think it's huge oversell, but I do think you're overselling a little bit. My whole thing is, I just look at the history of Dave.
I look at the history of Dave Canales. That's why we agree to disagree.
Yeah, because the history of Dave Canales says one great year, one bad year, one great year, one bad. So I'm looking at that.
I'm looking at the history of Dave Canales. Turns Geno Smith into a NFC Player of the Month. As a quarterbacks coach, revives Baker's career as an offensive coordinator. What's he going to do with Bryce Young as head coach? He's already talked about Bryce getting rid of the ball quicker, fixing his internal clock. So I think we're going to see some progress from Bryce Young.
Upgraded, Baker gets his contract. It may have just been one of those perfect storm years that everybody gets what they want.
Yeah, but the Falcons, I've got this division coming down to week 18. I've got the Falcons at 8 and 9, edging out the 7 and 10 Panthers and 7 and 10 Buccaneers. They're going to beat Pittsburgh in week 1. Now, if Pittsburgh acquires Ayuk, I will flip this to Pittsburgh, and then we will have a 3-way tie between Atlanta, Tampa, and Carolina at 7 and 10 for the division. I do not know who'd win the division in that scenario, but we're not going to find out today.
Well, here's the thing for you. I've been following closely because I thought it was like hogwash, but it turns out
The Browns offered Amari Cooper a 2nd and a 5th for Ayuk. The Browns offered Cooper a 2nd rounder in 25, a 5th rounder in 25 for Ayuk, and the Niners declined because the Niners were going to accept, but Ayuk didn't want to go to Cleveland, so the trade never transpired.
That's the thing right there, is that Ayuk doesn't want to play for Cleveland, but the 49ers want to take the deal, and so Ayuk's not going to sign the contract extension. Ayuk wants to play for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh doesn't have a deal in place that the 49ers want, but Ayuk will sign the extension. That's the holdout. Right there.
Yeah, and Pittsburgh has to offer – their package isn't as good as the Browns. Their trade package, regardless of what they pitch, it's not going to be as good as the Browns unless they throw Pickens in, and they're not going to trade Pickens. They want Ayuk as a number 2. So that's the whole thing.
Yeah. So the same thing is, my prediction, Ayuk stays with the 49ers.
I agree.
49ers say, here's a $5 million raise. Take it. Go off in a year.
Yeah.
That's what I think happens.
If the Steelers had Cameron Sutton, I would probably give him the win. He got suspended for the first 8 games. This was going to be an over, but with Rondale Moore out for the year, I think the Falcons win narrowly in a defensive game, 20-17. Eagles beat the Falcons on Monday night. Chiefs beat the Falcons. Falcons beat the Saints and Buccaneers to get to 3-2, but they lose to Carolina in Carolina to get to 3-3. They beat Seattle, they're 4-3. They lose to Tampa and Baker, they're 4-4. They lose to Dallas, they're 4-5. They lose to New Orleans, they're 4-6. They beat Denver in Denver. Kirk Cousins, I know he sucks in the altitude, but I think he beats the rookie Bo Nix. And they're 5-6 entering the bye week. They beat the Chargers to get back to 6-6. They lose the Vikings in Minnesota. They lose the Raiders on Monday night, so they're 6-8. They beat the Giants. They're 7-8. They lose the Commanders. They're 7-9. They beat the Panthers in a pivotal game to win the NFC South to finish the year at 8-9 in Atlanta in Week 18. So that is the Falcons' path to the division. For me, Joey, that's the Falcons' path to the division. What do you want to add to that before I get to Carolina? I'm sure you got something you want to add to that, because I've got the Falcons at 8-9, edging out Carolina and Tampa. I feel like you're not really going to say much until we get to Tampa at the end here. Because this outside of Baker, that no worries. No worries. You do your business. But yeah, I've got the Falcons at 8-9, edging out Carolina in Week 18 for the division.
My big thing is I think you overthink health. I think Carolina has a long way to go and a lot more to prove than anybody else in this division.
Well, this is where we disagree, and I'm pulling up the depth charts right now to prove my point. Deontay Johnson is their new number 1. They got him from Pittsburgh. Leggett is their number 2, and they've got Adam Thielen in the slot. They've got Mingo as their number 4. Terrace Marshall is their number 5. Ekwonu is the left tackle. They brought in Damian Lewis from Seattle at left guard. Corbett's their center. Robert Hunt is the right guard, and Moton's the right tackle. Ian Thomas, Tommy Tremble are starting over Jatavian Sanders right now. Sanders is third on the depth chart. They got Chuba Hubbard. Jonathan Brooks is still on the NFL injured list, but he's going to be eased back into the lineup. Going to be the bell cow for the Panthers. And Miles Sanders. I love this lineup for Carolina offensively. I think they are, and I think Canales is going to get a lot out of Bryce Young. To the point where the Panthers are going to be competitive because Bryce Young and Dave Canales are going to will the Panthers to wins. But this is not a complete roster. There are a lot of holes on defense. I do think the defensive line.
I am nothing against Canales. Okay, I'm nothing against Canales. I think you can do 3 things with Carolina. There are 2 things that are missing. Underwhelming. I have had high hopes for that receiving corps for a couple of years.
But they got Deontay Johnson from Pittsburgh, who might revive his career in Carolina, and they brought in Leggett, who's had a lot of success in camp. So those 2 might surprise you. Those 2 might surprise you with Canales. Anywhere else, they'd fail. With Canales, they might succeed. And I'm banking on that. Yeah.
I respect that. I believe that. But the reason I didn't see Deontay Johnson playing as anything more than is, I saw Deontay Johnson play a lot.
He is more durable than Dante Jackson. The Panthers traded Dante Jackson, their number 1 corner, to Pittsburgh for Deontay Johnson in a swap. And Deontay is more durable than Jackson. That is the only positive. He's younger and he's more durable. That is the only positive thing I will say about Deontay Johnson.
I can give you that.
I'm not.
He dropped every other pass. If you're going to be dropping every other pass,
He's all speed. Mark Suba loved him because of his speed coming out of Toledo, but he was all speed and he dropped a lot of passes on tape. That hasn't changed in the NFL yet. But, we'll see what he does with Carolina.
So how is that improving the receiving core? And the other one is
Well, let's look at the Panthers' defense. Then we'll dive into this a little bit further. But let's look at the defense. Derek Brown, Shy Tuttle, and Ashawn Robinson.
Back in the gun and keep him there. And don't let him move out of the pocket and just play pass. Bryce Young can be a very good player.
Yeah, and he's telling him to get rid of the ball in 2.5 seconds, really honing in on the fundamentals. That's why I think Canales is going to work in Carolina.
Bryce Young he is small. He does not have a strong arm. He has all the fundamentals. He is basically Baker Mayfield-like. If you really put it to it, without the brass for Baker Mayfield. So he's going to have to go about it the same way he did with Baker Mayfield. And get the ball, get it out on time. We're going to have timing routes. You know your guys are going to be there. Let this motherfucker from Pittsburgh not drop the ball this time. And see how that goes. Because that's what's going to make Bryce Young good.
Yeah.
And so you're really, what you're banking on is an out.
Yes.
Otherwise the Pacers are like a 4-win team. But you're banking on Canales just in himself being able to propel them to 8 to 9 wins. And
I've got them at 7 and 10 because of some of the holes on defense, but I'll explain why. Because they've got Derek Brown, Shy Tuttle, Ashawn Robinson. I think it's a better defensive line than a year ago. Josie Jewell and Shaq Thompson, that's a better inside linebacker core than a year ago. Thompson got injured in week.
I think Robinson's a great player.
And pairing him with Derek Brown just makes it a lot harder. Because last year, the Panthers really didn't have a second good player next to Derek Brown. And while Shy Tuttle's a serviceable nose tackle, if you have Derek Brown, Shy Tuttle, and a nobody at 34 left in next to Derek Brown and Shy Tuttle, teams are just going to double team Brown. And now they can't do that because if you double team Brown, it opens things up for Robinson. If you double team Robinson and Brown, it opens things up for Tuttle. So that's one positive about the defensive line for the Panthers. Not a lot of depth behind those three.
That's why I really agree with you because they love that defensive line. So, yeah, that's where I really agree with you on, how good they can be defensively. Because that line, I think, is going to be one of the better lines in the NFC.
And they've got Josie Jewell and Shaq Thompson inside linebacker. They drafted Trevin Wallace in the 3rd round out of Kentucky. I don't think much of Wallace, but if Jewell and Thompson are healthy, this is going to be one of the better run defenses. If the defensive line and the linebacker duo of Jewell and Thompson stays healthy, this is going to be one of the better run defenses in the NFC.
I like Wallace, but I really don't like him as well as some of the other 3rd and 7th round inside linebackers or strong side linebackers or wherever they're going to be put between those two. So I like him, but I don't necessarily.
Yeah, there were other linebackers drafted later in the draft that could have more of an impact. Cedric Gray, 4th round pick with the Titans. Tommy Eichenberg, 5th round pick with the Raiders. There are other guys in this class that I think could have bigger impacts than Wallace. I'm definitely in agreement with you on that. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is the 3rd string linebacker on the Eagles behind he's behind 2 guys. He's behind Nakobe Dean and he's behind another guy, not Devin White, but the other linebacker, Zach Bond. I think Trotter Jr. can beat both of those guys out by the home stretch. He probably will remain on backup most of the rookie year, but by week 12, week 13, I could see Trotter Jr. starting. Because Bond's played outside linebacker his entire career. Zach Bond's played outside linebacker in a 43 and 34 his entire career, Joey, and Nakobe Dean can't stay healthy. So I could see Trotter Jr. starting over both of those guys by week 12, week 13. Probably going to start out the year learning the playbook on third string, but by week 12, week 13, that's when Jalen Hurts took over for Carson Wentz, and I kind of see the same timeline with Trotter Jr. Edgerrin Cooper was gone. The Titans couldn't pick him. But, yeah, I mean, there were guys available. Peyton Wilson. So they passed on Peyton Wilson and Trotter Jr. for Trevin Wallace. But, yeah, looking at the... Jalen Ford. But they had a lot of confidence in Joel Thompson. But Thompson's a player you can buy out next year if he gets injured again. That's the thing. That's why there were better options on the board. But looking at the Panthers at edge rusher, this is really their Achilles heel on defense. DJ Wadham, who is a backup edge rusher with the Vikings, is starting at 34 right outside linebacker. Clowney's starting at left outside linebacker, and they have DJ Johnson and K'Lavon Chasen as the backups. I really think the Panthers' weakness is at edge rusher.
DJ Johnson's the guy I like. I like him coming out.
Oregon.
He's a very nice player. I think he has a lot of potential. I just don't like the fact that he sits behind guys that I think are not as good as players as him.
Well, Wadham's on the PUP list right now. Wadham's on the PUP list, so DJ Johnson is getting those first-team reps with Clowney. And there's a window of opportunity for him to take that job from Wadham if Wadham does not come back from the PUP list before the regular season starts. There really is. There's a window of opportunity.
I hope he does because I think he sits behind players that are subpar, who can't hold a candle to it. And if he gets that opportunity, I hope he floats with it because he is so much. Because I think the Panthers will be better defensively, and I don't think they're going to meet your defensive expectations with the starting linebackers they had. But if Johnson starts, I think they have a chance.
I like their inside linebackers, Joel and Thompson, but I think their edge rusher is their weakness. I said edge rusher with Wadham, Thompson, with Wadham, Clowney, Chasen, and DJ Johnson. I think edge rusher is the weakness for the Panthers. I love their defensive line and inside linebackers, but edge rusher is the big weakness for the Panthers. If DJ Johnson comes in, they've got a chance. At corner, they've got J.C. Horn as their number one corner. He's been a number two corner. He's barely been able to stay healthy as a number two corner. He's now the number one corner with Dante Jackson gone. Dane Jackson's the number two corner. Troy Hill's the number three corner. Troy Hill's the nickel. Chow Smith-Wade, who had 2 interceptions in the Senior Bowl, is your dime corner. And you have Xavier Woods at strong safety, Fuller at free safety from the Rams. And then you have Sam Franklin Jr., last year's backup strong safety, and Nick Scott, last year's starting strong safety on the Bengals as a backup free safety. So Panthers, they do have a lot of depth at safety, a lot of depth at linebacker, a lot of depth at safety, but they're very top-heavy as far as their roster goes. And I think their secondary can be an asset if they stay healthy, but there's some holes there.
They have a lot of depth underneath the backfield. Couple guys I like. But they also have some guys that they're nice role players. What do their starting corners look like? I'm not impressed. Nice players.
Dane Jackson can be a number two corner. He just hasn't been consistent enough in Buffalo to where you're really sold on him as the guy. Same with Troy Hill as a nickel. He's a reliable dime. He can be okay in the nickel, but he's not steady enough to where you're like, okay, he's an every down nickel. He's an every week nickel guy.
Troy Hill's over-reliable. He's over-reliable. That's what he is. What he's been for years. What he was with the Rams, what he was with the Browns, what he is with the Rams again. I mean, he's over-reliable. He
Yeah.
They need to create turnovers.
And the Texans added Tommy Townsend, the Chiefs punter. I forgot to do special teams for the AFC South, but Tommy Townsend, the Chiefs punter, is now in the Texans. So I just felt like throwing that out there.
Interesting. That is a good pickup for the Texans.
Yeah. So
Great on that one.
yeah, Eddie Pinero's still the kicker. Johnny Hecker's still the punter. Blackshear and Smith Marset are the return specialists. All right, let's get to the Panthers. Let's get to the Panthers schedule here. I'm going to tell you why I have the Panthers at 7-10. Because I'm sure Joey's going to disagree with me on some of the games here. All right, so we got the Panthers. They play the Saints in week 1. I think the Saints win that game at home. If it was in Carolina, I'd pick the Panthers. Panthers-Chargers. I like the Chargers to beat the Panthers. The Panthers are going to start the year 0-2. Panthers play the Raiders in week 3. I do not trust Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew. I think the Panthers beat the Raiders in Las Vegas. This is where Canales gets his first win in Vegas. And the Panthers are 1-2.
Here's the problem I have with that. The big thing is O'Connell and Minshew, they are very good quarterbacks, except for the fact that they run the ball over. This goes back to that problem I spoke of with the defensive backs of Panthers not getting turnovers. Okay?
Bryce Young has a higher ceiling than both O'Connell or Minshew. And that's really the big reason why I like the Panthers to steal this game. Because the Raiders' secondary isn't that great either. I mean, they got Nate Hobbs, Jack Jones, and Corey Bennett's their nickel.
Here's the thing, though. Maybe you could just 350 yards and lose because of turnovers. If they don't get turnovers and Minshew goes to 350 yards, they win. That's the thing.
I think the Panthers can get some turnovers. I think you're underestimating the secondary, Joey. I mean, Fuller can get you 5 or 6 interceptions a year at free safety. Fuller is literally the only guy on this secondary that can get you 4 to 6 interceptions a year. Him and Horn. Those two are going to have to carry the team as far as interceptions go. Dane Jackson can get you like 1 to 3 picks. Hill usually only gets you 1 pick a year, but he's consistent. He gets you 9 to 11 deflections a year, but he only gets you like 1 pick a year, and it's not a pick 6.
I'll give you this with Fuller. Fuller was an amazing prospect. I loved him. You loved him. Everybody loved him.
I loved his man and press coverage, but I didn't love his zone coverage. But
None of us, when he came back, he was not the same anymore. Or maybe a one-on-one. If he can get back to full
and he'll be covering Devontae Adams. Instead of covering number 2 receivers, he's going to be covering number 1s. So Horn, instead of covering Jacoby Myers, he's going to be covering Devontae Adams. Are you telling me Adams is just going to go off in that game and the Raiders are going to win? This is one of the games where Joey and I disagree.
But if Moore knows that he is 100% recovered and back to his old self, that can make all the difference with this defensive backfield.
Yeah.
But as it stands now, if you put Adams against Moore, let Adams just run for, as we know from last year, Adams is going to win that.
I like the Panthers in a surprise game. I think this is the Dave Canales statement game, and I've got the Panthers pulling the upset. I've got the Bengals beating the Panthers. I love Canales, but not enough to give the Panthers a home win over the Bengals. They drop to 1-3. They also lose the Bears and Caleb Williams, so they're 1-4 now after beating the Raiders.
As much as I don't get through, I will say, their
Yeah. Week 6 is where I think the Panthers start their run. I have the Panthers beating Atlanta at home, beating Washington on the road, beating Denver on the road, and then beating the Saints at home. And at this point, the Panthers are 4-5 on the year after starting the year 1-4. They are now 5-4 following a 4-game winning streak. They have momentum. Joey's ready to jump on the Panthers bandwagon. The Panthers are hosting the Giants. But I think the pass rushing tandem of Brian Burns and Thibodeau steals this game. Because whenever Joey hops on the bandwagon, the momentum for a team just crumbles. It's like you like to keep holding the stock when the team has momentum. You don't sell the stock at the right time. This is the week where you sell the stock, and the Giants, they beat the Panthers in week 10 because of their pass rusher duo of Thibodeau and Brian Burns. I think it's a Brian Burns revenge game, and the Panthers lose to Brian Burns. And Brian Dable just comes up with a better game plan than Canales.
I'm not the good person to say that I'm going to jump on a bandwagon, but I'm going to say this. The teams that they play, you're going to have some interior offensive line who has redeemed track. As we said before, I love the defensive tackle combination. The Panthers are running. So, am I going to say it's impossible for them to go on the game run? Absolutely not.
Because week 6 through 10, that's probably their best chance to gain momentum, Joey. Versus Atlanta, at Washington, at Denver, versus New Orleans, versus the Giants. That's probably their 5-week window to build momentum heading into the bye week. And as long as they win 4 of those 5 games, they're going to be in contention for the second half of the season. But I've got them at 5-5 entering the bye week. They host the Chiefs following the bye week. They lose. They play the Buccaneers in Carolina. They win. They beat Baker Mayfield. And they're 6-6 now. They lose the Eagles and Cowboys. They fall to 6-8. They beat the Cardinals. They're 7-8. Well, the Buccaneers left guard Sua Opeta, the Buccaneers left guard, tore his ACL. He's out for the year. So Derek Brown's going to be playing a backup left guard in the Buccaneers. Graham Barton's at center, Cody Mox at right guard, but Sua Opeta, the weak link of that interior, tore his ACL. The backup's in, so Derek Brown's still going to have a field day, but the other guys could get held in check by Mock and Barton. But I think Derek Brown will still for Tampa Bay's left guard, Sua Opeta. Yeah, Panthers actually do have an advantage. I think they beat Tampa at home, but they lose to Tampa in week 17. And they lose to Atlanta to end the year. So they're 7-8, and they have a chance to win the division, but they got to go to Tampa Bay and Atlanta to end the year, and I just don't think they have enough to get it done. That's why I have them at 7-10. Yeah, if they can stay healthy, I could see 7-10 because that weeks 6 through 10, that's really their best chance to build momentum. I have them beating the Raiders, and I have them beating the Buccaneers at home and the Cardinals at home late in the season in week 16. I have them winning 7 games. If they can steal a game from the Giants or they can steal a game from the Cowboys, they can win the division. Or they steal a game from the Bears and Caleb Williams. If they can do that, they can win the division. There's 3 or 4 games on their schedule they could steal, and as long as they steal 2 of them, they can win the division at 9-8. But I'm not confident enough to pick them to win the division outright, Joey, because of their edge rusher situation, because of their problems on defense. They have too many holes on defense to win the division this year. But I do think they benefit from an easy strength of schedule, and they go 7-10 and surprise a lot of people. 7-10.
I don't think they are a great pick to win the division this year. If they have another good draft next year, well, it only gets more competitive because I think they have the team to really make a run.
They've got Canales, they've got the quarterback, they've got the offensive line. They want to be run heavy. They want to incorporate Jonathan Brooks into this offense. And I think they're a team to watch down the road, but I think they're a year away because they just have too many holes on defense this year, Joey.
Yeah, and I agree with that. They have too many holes, especially in the defensive backfield. I think that they need to get their talented linebacker on the field and stop relying on the guys they had before. And I think we need to see if Canales can really be what he showed last year in Tampa.
I feel like Baker was a product of Canales. You feel like Canales was a product of Baker. I feel like Baker was a product of Canales.
I don't think Canales was like a Baker. I think Canales was going to be offensive coordinator, but I think Canales and Baker's combination of Baker's up here with Canales really upheld him more than he normally would have been from him. Because remember, Baker up, down, down. And he had a tough year where Canales was.
I feel like Baker's going to have a down year, but I'll explain why after we get through with the Saints.
Well, that's not even much to explain, just look at this. I mean, he had a tough year last year. History shows he's going to have a down year this year. I mean, there's not much to explain. Baker is a crazy player.
Yeah, so let's get to the Saints here. Saints I have in last place at 5-12. There's a lot of people that are bearish on the Saints. There's a lot of people that are bullish on the Saints. You know, I think the Saints are an interesting team, but their schedule to begin the year is brutal. It is. Like, ugh. Yeah. I'm trying to pull up the Saints. I'm trying to click on some stuff. My computer is slow. It is lagging. And ugh. I don't want the Buccaneers restream. I want the Saints. I want to click on the Saints. Here we go. We got the Saints schedule. The restream's like, we want you to talk about the Buccaneers and Baker first. No, we're talking about the Saints first. We're going in alphabetical order. I get there's more appeal with the Buccaneers. I don't disagree. I don't disagree, restream. There is more appeal in the Buccaneers and the Saints. But we're going in alphabetical order. Yeah. And I'm going to explain how it's going to hurt them in a second. But yeah, A.T. Perry, Olave are going to be starting at receiver. Fuaga's the left tackle. Trevor Penning's the right tackle. Ryan Ramczyk, knee injury, out for the year. Lucas Patrick is starting at left guard. That might be the worst starting left guard in the league because Patrick struggled center with the Bears last year. He's now the Saints starting left guard since Andres Pete is gone. Eric McCoy at center, Cesar Ruiz at right guard. I think Patrick's going to be a liability at left guard. Perry, Olave, and Shaheed. I don't know how Fuaga's going to do at left tackle. He played right tackle in high school and in college. Derek Carr's the starter. Hayner's the backup. Rattler's the third stringer. Alvin Kamara is the starting running back. And, oh yeah, I forgot there's NFL preseason on. It's 1:21 already. So I am going to put it on NFL Network now. It's the Bears-Bills game. The Bills just punted it near the end zone. But yeah, I'll get back to that in a second. But, they're about to go to a commercial. But, Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, Taysom Hill are all back at tight end. Kamara, Williams, Kendre Miller are back at running back. Adam Prentice, Xander Horvath. There's not a lot of depth at receiver if these guys get injured. If Olave, Perry, and Shaheed get injured, the backups are Equinemi, St. Brown, Cedric Wilson Jr., Bub Means. I can live with starting those guys for 2 to 5 games, but not for a full 17-game season. And Nick Saldiveri out of Old Dominion's the backup to Patrick Lucas. Landon Young's the backup to Fuaga. Shane Lemieux's the backup to Eric McCoy. So, the Saints, they do have some... They are top-heavy offensively, but I also feel like they lack depth at certain positions. Cameron Jordan and Carl Granderson are the starting edge rushers. Shepard and Colin Saunders are the starting defensive tackles. Peyton Turner and Chase Young are the backup edge rushers. Christian Boyd and Brian Bresci are the backup defensive tackles. And Isaiah Foskey and Tanoka Passignon are the third-string edge rushers for the Saints. Pete Werner, Demario Davis, and Willie Gay are the starting linebackers in a 43 defense. I would think that Willie Gay and Demario are going to start in the 4-2-5 defense, but after Werner got paid, he might be an every down starter, and Willie Gay just might be a situational player in New Orleans. I don't know, but Our Lads does have Willie Gay Jr. listed as a Sam linebacker when he played weak side in Kansas City. I would play Willie Gay at the weak side and move Werner to Sam. Werner's a good weak side linebacker. I'm not taking anything away from him, but I just think Willie Gay provides more of an impact at weak side linebacker than Werner. And Willie Gay was the energy guy on the Chiefs during their Super Bowl run the last 2 years. He was the energy guy on the Chiefs defense, the high energy guy. That matters. So, and while I like Werner, I love his humbleness, I love his work ethic, I love his floor, I love his attitude. He doesn't strike me as a high energy guy. Werner doesn't strike me as a high energy guy. Willie Gay is a high energy guy. So that's the reason I'd play him at the weak side and move Werner to the Sam. But that's just my 2 cents on the situation. I think they have 3 good linebackers. They also have Jalen Ford and DeMarco Jackson for depth and Nafai Sewell for depth. So they still have a lot of depth at those linebacker spots, Joey. And that's one of the things that makes the Saints defense really good, despite Dennis Allen and Joe Woods mismanaging things at times. So Caleb Williams did get a field goal against the Bills, and he is playing on NFL Network. I know I'm going off topic, Joey, but I said I was going to tune into the preseason at 1, and Caleb Williams is playing. So, I kind of want to see what happens here on this drive. So I apologize for getting off topic, Joey. I'll get to the Saints secondary in a second, but this is really interesting. I want to see what Caleb does on this drive. That game started at noon, an hour before the Bears-Bills game, but I don't think it's on NFL Network. And Johnson with a defensive stop.
I've got NFL Plus. So.
Yeah, I don't. So I get whatever's on NFL Network. But yeah, it's a 3rd and 6 here. Caleb Williams is 2 for 2 with 54 yards on the day. So he hasn't played a lot, but he's been good. DeAndre Swift did a 42-yard reception that got the Bears in field goal range. Caleb Williams, third down, pressured, stays calm, but throws into coverage to Cam Lewis, and that there's a flag on the play. You got an official screaming that it's pass interference, and Lewis is waving his hands like, nope. And Sean Hockeylee's fingers are pointing towards the defense. That means it's a defensive penalty, and that means Caleb Williams is going to get bailed out by Sean Hockeylee, and Cam Lewis got called with illegal contact here. I did not see any illegal contact. If anything, that was offensive pass interference. Look at the Bears receiver. He grabbed Cam Lewis by the helmet. If anything, that should be offensive pass interference or offensive face mask. That should not be a defensive penalty. I disagree with Hockeylee, but, he's one of the better officials, so I'm not going to give him shit for the call. Now, if that were Bill Vinovich or Ron Torbert, this might be a different story, but because of that penalty, Caleb Williams' completion streak remains intact. So instead of going 2 for 2 to 2 for 3, he's now 3 for 3 because of Sean Hockeylee's biceps. Like father, like son. The Hockeylees and their biceps with penalties and stuff. But yeah, DJ Moore, completion here. We'll get to the Saints secondary. They had 3 defensive backs with 10 deflections last year. Lattimore, Alontae Taylor, Paulson Adebo, all 3 are starting. Jordan Howden, 2023 fifth-round pick out of Indiana, replaces Marcus May. And Tyrann Mathieu remains the free safety. Will Harris, Kool-Aid McKinstry's the dime corner, the number 4 corner on the Saints. But Will Harris and Abram are the backup strong safety and backup free safeties on the Saints. So looking at the Saints depth chart, they do have some talent. Blake Grupe's back at kicker. Rashid Shaheed is the return specialist. Lou Headley's the punter. They got some guys. They do. But looking at Caleb Williams, watching him move the ball, this is really impressive. And Caleb throws it into coverage, and the Bears catch it. Was that Cole Met? Who made that catch? That was an incredible catch. That was an incredible throw by Caleb. 85. I think that's Cole Met. I could be wrong on that, though. 85 made the catch. That was a Mahomes-type throw from Caleb Williams against the Bills. That was really impressive. That was like the Mahomes throw. Williams 4 for 4, 95 yards. Caleb Williams looks really good today. And Colmet drops a pass. That was Colmet who made that catch. Caleb goes back to Met, and Colmet drops the pass. Caleb didn't throw into coverage. He didn't do anything wrong. That was just a rare drop by Colmet, where he's not being covered. He's wide open, and he just drops the ball. That was just a rare drop by Colmet there. But, hey, Caleb's done a good job so far against the Bills. I mean, if he plays like this, the Bears could make the playoffs. That's the crazy part. If he plays like this against other teams, and Javon Solomon, the Troy defensive end, with a tackle for a loss. All right, I'll pull up the Saints schedule. It's 3rd and 9. I want to see what Caleb does in 3rd and 9 here, how he overcomes this. Javon Solomon, the rookie out of Troy, with a good tackle on 2nd down to make it 3rd and long. Yeah, Vikings Raiders is next, but Caleb Williams, hardly any time in the pocket. He reacts quickly. He takes off or scrambles for a 1st down, and then he slides to the ground. Caleb Williams, 3rd and 9. I mean, yeah, Caleb is going to be a problem. I think a lot of people are underestimating Caleb, and they're overreacting to the bad decisions he's made in practice. But he's done a good job so far today, Joey. It's kind of surprising. Yeah, but he's been good during the game so far. I mean, he's playing with a lot of confidence, which is good. Play action, waits. He threw it a little too low there. He threw it a little too low there on 2nd and 9, which led to the incompletion. But he also kind of held on to the ball too long. Coverage was good. There was no opening for him to scramble. Okay, I do have some Steeler news, Joey. Marcus Golden, who recently signed an extension with the Steelers, is retiring. So the Steelers, they had Golden as their number 3 edge rusher behind Watt and Highsmith, and they had Nate Herbig from Wisconsin as that number 4 edge rusher. So this all of a sudden the Steelers lose some edge rusher depth. I know you're happy about that as a Browns fan. You're sad to see Marcus Golden retire, but you're happy that the Steelers have one less quality edge rusher. But yeah, Marcus Golden has retired. That is news. And Caleb Williams. Yeah, very classy gesture. But some Steeler fans were that classy about Nick Chubb, so Joey's just returning the favor. All right, we're pulling up the Saints schedule here. I've got the Saints beating the Panthers in week 1, and then they're going to suck for a while. I have got the Saints losing to Dallas in Dallas. I've got them losing to the Eagles. I've got them losing to the Falcons in Atlanta. I've got them losing to Kansas City on Monday night. I've got them losing to Baker Mayfield in Tampa. I've got them losing to Denver. I think Sean Payton wants to beat his former team. I've got the Chargers beating them, and I've got the Saints going from 1-0 to 1-9. If this happens, Dennis Allen and Joe Woods are out, and Clint Kubiak is the first interim head coach of the year. I really believe that. If they go from 1-0 to 1-9, I think at that point they'd have to fire Dennis Allen and Joe Woods, like the Panthers did with Patricia and their defensive coordinator a few years ago. I think the Saints would be at that point where they have to roll the dice on Clint Kubiak and see what happens. And I've actually got the Panthers going 4-4 with Clint Kubiak. And this was one of the more intriguing scenarios that I pitched to you, Joey, that Saints start 1-9, they fire Dennis Allen, Joe Woods, and they promote Kubiak, and they turn things around with Kubiak. This was one of my more compelling pitches I made earlier in the year. It was. I've got the Browns beating the Saints. No playoff predictors. I'm not calling for a tie. Calling for the Broncos to beat the Saints. But yeah, this is an interesting scenario. I've got the Saints beating the Falcons. They lose to the Browns. Bye week, they beat the Rams at home. They lose to the Giants in New York because the Giants have Burns and Thibodeau. But I could see the Saints stealing that game with Clint Kubiak. They beat the Commanders. They lose the Packers. They lose to Orange Saints in Week 17, and they beat the Buccaneers in Week 18 in Tampa with Kubiak. They beat the Buccaneers in Tampa with Clint Kubiak. I mean, that's a game the Buccaneers should win, but in order for my Falcons 8-9 prediction to come true, the Saints have to beat the Buccaneers in Tampa. Otherwise, it creates an 8-9 tie between the Falcons and Buccaneers, and in that scenario, Baker goes back to the playoffs with the 8-9 Buccaneers. I'm not allowing that to happen. So Clint Kubiak screws Baker out of a playoff appearance. Yeah, because I've got the Saints going 5-12, but I have them starting 1-9. and then going 4-3 in their final 7 games under Clint Kubiak. So, you know, and if that, well, actually 1-8. So they'd go they lose weeks 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So they'd be 1-8 under Dennis Allen, but they'd be 4-4 under Kubiak. So if that happens, I think Kubiak remains on board as the head coach, and he's the first hire of the coaching cycle, an internal hire. But I think that's what ends up happening. And I also think he brings Tommy Rees, Browns receiver coach, to New Orleans with him as his offensive coordinator next year. So that's what I'm predicting for the Saints. What? It's a good plot twist. You have to have a coach getting fired mid-season, and Dennis Allen being replaced by Kubiak and the Saints succeeding with Kubiak's a good plot twist. It really is. It's a good plot twist. So, you know. But yeah, we'll get to the Buccaneers now. They're the final team. Josh Allen's still in against the Bears. Caleb Williams got the Bears a field goal, but Josh Allen is playing this first quarter against the Bears. And the Bears don't seem to have an answer for Allen. I mean, they kept Allen off the scoreboard, but oh shit, we got an injury here. 21 of the Bears is injured. Is that Jalen Jones, the Bears' best corner? Shit, that's a huge loss. No, Jones is that's Jalen Jones is the backup corner. That's not I was thinking of Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson's healthy, but Jalen Jones, the number 5 corner on the Bears depth chart, is injured. So that's not a big loss. You still have Terrell Smith, you still have Kyler Gordon, you still have Stevenson, and you still have Jalen Johnson. Now, if that were Jalen Johnson, who's grabbing his knee, I'd be concerned. That's Jalen Jones. He's the number 5 corner on the Bears. That is somewhat of a loss, but it's not a massive loss. I'd be a lot more concerned if that was Jalen Johnson, who was the best corner in the league last year, according to Pro Football Focus. But hey, we're going to go to the Buccaneers now. This will be the final team we preview today. We'll be back with the AFC East and NFC East next week. I already got my notes in the Big Ten for next week typed. See, because I pull all-nighters on Friday nights to prepare for the podcast. And, yeah, but looking at the Buccaneers here, Buccaneers are in an interesting spot. I've talked with Tony Mario about this Buccaneers team. But, yeah, Baker Mayfield's back, but the big surprise is Jalen McMillan. Jalen McMillan has done so well in training camp that both him and Trey Palmer are pushing Chris Godwin for the number 2 receiver job. And with Godwin being a UFA in 2025, with Evans getting paid, Baker getting paid, McMillan and Palmer on rookie deals, it just allows the Buccaneers to continue to be dominant. So McMillan, Evans, and Godwin. Palmer was listed as the starting receiver initially, but McMillan has jumped Trey Palmer according to our lads. That's something we're going to have to keep an eye on, Joey, because I remember hearing very first day of Bucs training camp that both Palmer and McMillan were getting more reps as the number 2 receiver than Godwin. So the fact that all 3 of those receivers are pushing each other for playing time, that says something, Joey. You also have Raheem Jarrett and Sterling Shepard competing for the wide receiver 5 and 6 jobs. So Buccaneers look really deep at receiver.
I'm always a fan of competition. If you have a great wide receiver that is getting pushed out, that's only a good thing.
So, Wirfs is the left tackle. Ben Bredesen, who was taking over for Ufa, who suffered a season-ending injury. Sua Opeta was supposed to be the starting left guard. He tore his ACL. So Ben Brett is in the backup left guard on the Buccaneers, is now the starting left guard. He was awful with the Giants, but he gets another shot with the Buccaneers. Graham Barton is the center. I would just move Barton over to left guard and play Hainsley at center this year, and then move Barton over to center next year. I know Barton's good enough to play center now, Joey, but with your starting left guard tearing his ACL, playing Barton at left guard and playing Hainsley, who's already got rapport with Baker Mayfield, just makes more logistical sense. You can move Barton to center next year, but I'd play him at left guard this year so that there's not that drop-off in the offensive line for Baker Mayfield. But that's not what the Buccaneers are choosing to do. They're choosing to start Barton. Hainsley's the backup center. Cody Mock's the right guard. Godecki's the right tackle. Cade Otton's the starting tight end. But Payne Durham, Cole Keefe, last year's number 2 tight end, is getting supplanted by Payne Durham. And Devin Culp, a 2024 7th-round pick out of Washington, also on this roster as well. Interesting development. Bucky Irving has jumped both Sean Tucker and Chase Edmonds. He entered training camp as the number 4 running back behind Rachaad White, Chase Edmonds, and Sean Tucker. He's already jumped Tucker and Edmonds. Bucky Irving's already the number 2 running back on this depth chart behind White. That is interesting. That is an interesting development because you like Bucky Irving coming out of Oregon. He wasn't the best pass blocker, but, he had the vision. He could catch out of the backfield. So the fact that he's jumped both Tucker and Edmonds is encouraging because you really weren't expecting that from Irving right out of the gate. But you have to be encouraged by that he's already number 2 behind White. So he'll probably get some touches.
Bucky Irving was a great pickup there. I think he is going to take level impact for the team and just keep showing it through games.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Buccaneers' first 4 picks. Round 1, they got Graham Barton. Round 2, they got Braswell. Round 3, they got Jalen McMillan. Round 4, they got Bucky Irving. And all 4 of those picks are first or second team players. And Bucky Irving, 4th-round pick, he's a change of pace back. Braswell's situational pass rusher. Will probably start next year because Joe Tryon did not get a 5th-year tender. Cansey Villa and Logan Hall are on the defensive line. Golson and Gaines are still backups on this defensive line. Yaya Diaby takes over for Shaq Barrett at right outside linebacker. Joe Tryon's going to start at left outside linebacker, but he didn't get a 5th-year tender. Chris Braswell's probably going to learn under Tryon and take over for him. Anthony Nelson, who was the backup 34 right outside linebacker when Barrett got injured, is back. Levante David and KJ Britt are the starters. Servacha Dennis is the backup. I feel like another inside linebacker for depth is needed, but as long as David and Britt are healthy, I think the Buccaneers are going to be okay. Zion McCollum is now the number 1 corner. There were a lot of people saying Jamel Dean was going to be the number 1 corner when Carlton Davis got traded, but Zion McCollum has supplanted Jamel Dean as the number 1 corner. And what's interesting is that Christian Isian, who is an undrafted player in 2023, is beating out both Tyke Smith, one of Tampa Bay's 2 third-round picks, Bryce Hall, former Jet, and Josh Hayes, a 2023 6th-round pick for the nickel corner job. Undrafted player is currently the nickel corner on Tampa. They've got Whitehead and Winfield as the safeties. The backup safeties are Meriwether, Kayvon, and Tavier Thomas. I don't like the safety situation if Whitehead or Winfield goes down with an injury, but I do like the fact that Tampa's got 2 good corners. I wish they had a better nickel corner. Teams with 3 receivers are going to be problematic for Tampa, but the only team with 3 good receivers in this division is the Saints and maybe the Panthers. Panthers do have Thielen as their slot, but it's not a wow, exciting number 3 receiver. Falcons don't have Rondale Moore. Saints have Shaheed. it's manageable for Tampa's nickel corner, but teams with 3 good receivers like Detroit, Green Bay, they're going to be a pain in the ass for Tampa. But let's look at the Buccaneers' schedule now, and I'll tell you why I have them at 7-10. And you could argue that I probably should have gave Tampa a Week 18 home win against New Orleans. You could certainly argue that. We're at 70 viewers on Restream. Thank you guys so much. 68 on X, 1 on Twitch, and 1 on YouTube. Thank you. Joey and I appreciate it. I was going to do the recording on Anchor, but, I mean, you know, Spotify changed their recording settings. Now you have to upload a file. You can't even do a recording straight from Spotify. You have to upload the recording to Spotify. And I don't know how to do that. So, unfortunately, we're probably only going to be on TalkShoe and Restream from now on because Spotify bought out Anchor and they kept changing the policies of everything, and it kind of sucks now. Spotify kind of sucks for doing that. I'm not saying they're a horrible company. I'm just saying I wish they had just left it alone and just managed it. But here's the Buccaneers' schedule. Okay, Week 1, the Buccaneers play the Commanders. I have them winning this game. They play the Lions in Week 2. That's a loss. Week 3, I've got the Buccaneers losing to Denver. I have Bo Nix going into Tampa and beating the Buccaneers. Yeah, I mean, I have Denver going into Tampa and getting an upset win over Baker Mayfield. Bo Nix gets his first win over Baker. And the game's in Tampa. So there's an expectation that Tampa has to win that game. I have the Eagles beating Tampa to get them to 1-3. I have the Buccaneers losing to Atlanta. They're 1-4. They beat the Saints out of urgency. They beat the Saints out of urgency to get to 2-4. They lose to the Ravens at home on Monday Night Football. They're 2-5. They beat the Falcons. They're 3-5. They lose the Chiefs. They're on Monday night. They're 3-6. William Yanish, who was on the podcast earlier, voted for Baker Mayfield in one of our poll questions. Since William's a 49ers fan, we're giving Baker an upset win over the 49ers. So the Buccaneers are 4-6 entering the bye week. They beat the Panthers. They beat the Giants on the road. They're 5-6 now. They lose to Carolina. They're 5-7 in Carolina. They beat the Raiders. They're 6-7. They lose to the Chargers and Cowboys. They're 6-9. They beat Carolina. They're 7-9. They just have to beat the They just have to beat the Saints at home. They don't. They're 7-10. So I do have the Buccaneers at 7-10, but you can argue that a few of these losses that I have, like Tampa Bay losing to Denver and Bo Nix, Tampa Bay losing to New Orleans at home, Tampa Bay losing to Carolina on the road, a few of these losses could be flipped into wins. That argument does have merit, okay? I don't think they'll win as many games as the Eagles, Lions, or the Rams, but you could certainly make the argument. I know Joey's going to, the Baker Mayfield enthusiast, and Joey is going to make that argument that, well, you have the Buccaneers losing too many games. I mean, versus Denver at home should be a win. Versus New Orleans at home should be a win. You can even go as far as to say at Carolina should be a win, but that's... And I have them losing the Ravens on Monday Night Football. And that's a home game for Tampa at the Boat at Raymond James Stadium. So, in prime time for Baker. Baker and Lamar in prime time. Last time those two were on Monday night, you had that Browns-Ravens shootout where it was like 49-42, and I think Lamar was in the bathroom, and then he came out for the final drive, and the Ravens beat the Browns. That was an amazing game. Even though you hated the outcome of that game, you have to admit, that was an amazing game, that Baker-Lamar shootout on Monday night back in the day. That was an amazing game in Cleveland. Even though the Browns lost that game, that was an amazing finish. I think both quarterbacks kept trading points. and the Ravens won a high-scoring game. So I have the Buccaneers at 7-10, but you could certainly argue that they should have 9 or 10 wins because I gave the Buccaneers home losses to the Ravens on Monday Night Football, where the crowd's going to be really loud. I gave them a home loss to the Broncos and Bo Nix. I gave the Buccaneers a home loss to the Saints, Week 18. So if they win any of those games, they win the division over Atlanta 8-9. If both teams go 8-9, so. And I wanted to pick Atlanta as my division winner, so that's kind of why I picked the Buccaneers to lose those games, because I trust Canales. I don't trust Tampa's offensive coordinator, but I also think Baker's too talented for this team to be 6-11 or 5-10. And there's just too much talent around Baker for them to be that mediocre. Even if they miss the playoffs, the worst they're going to do is 7-10. But what do you think of the schedule here? I mean, I know this is probably the only team we're going to disagree on. And I know there's some exciting preseason games, Joey. So it's hard. I get it. Yeah, next week we get the AFC East and the NFC East divisions. So yeah, you're gonna get the AFC East. What are you thinking for thumbnail next week? I mean, could go with the Patriots quarterback room. Wes Langley thinks the Patriots got steals, and with both Drake May and with Joe Milton and Drake May, he thinks both of those quarterbacks are going to end up being steals in the draft. And Joe Milton, I watched the Patriot-Panther preseason game. Brissett went 0 for 3. Drake May went 3 for 4, but he got out of a 3rd and 12 with a screen pass. Bailey Zappi played most of the end of the first quarter, and he played from the back half of the first quarter to the first half of the third quarter. So he played like the last 5 minutes to the first 7 minutes of the third quarter. And then Joe Milton played the rest of the game. That's literally Gerard Mayo said the plan was for Brissett and May to each get one series, and then for Zappi and Milton to play the rest of the preseason. That was the plan going into the game. So, yeah, Patriots beat the Panthers. Panthers looked rusty, but they didn't play Bryce Young or most of their starters. They played most of their backups. But, yeah, next week we'll have the I'm gonna explain why I've got the Bills and Jets both finishing 11-6 and who wins the division. Where do the Patriots finish? How do they do with Brissett, and how do they do with Drake May? I do have Brissett winning one start. It's not what you'd think, but, you know, Swipa has the Patriots beating the Bengals. Swipa, one of the graphic designers who makes the thumbnails for Draft Utopia, he has the Patriots beating the Bengals. That's probably the boldest prediction I've heard for week 1 so far. I don't think it happens. And if it were to happen, I think Joe Burrow would have to throw 3 or 4 interceptions. Brissett would have to play turnover-free ball, and it would be an ugly 19-17 win. I just can't see the Bengals losing to New England unless Burrow throws 4 picks, Brissett plays out of his mind, and Ron Torbert's officiating the game. Those 3 things have to happen for New England to have a snowball's chance against Cincinnati. I just think the Bengals are a better overall team than New England right now. And don't get me wrong, when the Patriots are fully healthy, they have one of the best defenses in the league. Their defense was incredibly competitive in the first 4 games of last year. And then Matt Judon and Christian Gonzalez got injured against the Cowboys. They were never the same after that. Even when the defense did well, Mac Jones just couldn't do shit with that defense. And the defense actually played well enough for them to actually win some of these games with Belichick, but they just couldn't get the job done. And you can see construction of new Highmark Stadium outside of the Bills-Bears game at Highmark Stadium. But yeah, we'll be back. We'll also preview the Big Ten. A week after that, we'll preview the SEC, the AFC West, the NFC West. We'll talk Week 0. Oh, and on August 31st, not only will we have a mock draft, we will also have a college football playoff, a 12-team playoff. So, yeah, lots of exciting stuff. But, yeah, we'll be back next week. A lot of exciting news to go over. That's Joseph Potter. I'm Chris Ransom. We want to thank our 72 listeners for tuning in to the entirety. I've got some preseason football to watch. Joey's got some preseason football to watch. We will see you guys later. And I want to thank William Yanish again for coming on the podcast. That was cool of him. And we'll also have an uploaded episode of Under the Bleachers for Tuesday. I don't know what the thumbnail will be yet, but I will let him decide that. I'll give him more input. And hey, we might, if Joey ever gets tired of college football previews and just wants to do NFL, putting the college football previews on Under the Bleachers and putting the NFL previews on the podcast to shorten things is an idea I've considered. It's not an idea I'm ready to implement, but it's an idea I'm actually considering behind the scenes if things continue to go well for William and myself. You know, I don't think we're at that point yet, but we might be at that point in 5 or 10 years if Joey just doesn't have the energy to be on the call for 4 hours and, you know, he'd rather talk about the NFL and college. I don't think we're there yet, but we might be there in 5 years. So that's why I'm running the scenario in my head. But hey, I'm not ready to execute it yet, and I still want to talk about college football with our audience, and I intend to, so yeah. But we'll see you guys next week for the Big Ten, SEC, AFC East, and the NFC East. So long.